Have you ever thought about how much you know about the world around you? Someone may say that they know a lot or even everything, but this is not true. If you think about it, we either do not know anything at all or exactly as much as we should know. After all, everyone has their own secrets, and the universe is no exception. It keeps thousands of secrets that are waiting for one day to show themselves. One of these secrets can easily be monsters. You say it's a joke. It's not possible. It only exists in fairy tales. But monsters are already hiding between us, and it can be anyone. Your work colleague, relative, friend, acquaintance. One of these casts includes our hero. On the road, you can see many traces, similar to bloody spots, running your hand over them, someone carefully trying to study them. This unusual young man is looking for monsters in the footsteps, looking closely at which he realizes that the monster is somewhere nearby. The guy is clearly not an ordinary person. Who else can see eyes that glow in the dark purple? He is calm, focused on the find. As soon as this trace got on the guy's hand, his amulet began to glow, and red lines went from it in different directions all over his skin. These lines went from his hand. His eyes lit up with radiance. He took the energy of the traces, and now he can use it whenever he wants. But it's not that simple. In order to use this energy, you first need to understand where the monster itself is. The liquid became much denser, and someone's image began to appear in it. Thinking about his own, the guy does not even notice that behind him began some kind of revitalization. A bright red light came on, very similar to an explosion. Feeling uneasy, the guy looked up and saw a shadow hovering over him, which was threateningly closing its claw on him, and the guy was a little confused, but still managed to react in time and jumped aside, and the monster missed the blow and drove his paw right into the ground, leaving only a hole and stones. The boy crouched down on one knee to catch his breath, realized that the monster was hiding in order to strike a stealthy blow from behind, and the boy did not seem surprised. You can expect anything from monsters. And as you can see, a liquid dripping from it was very similar to blood, but it is not yet known. Raising his gaze higher, the boy saw that the wall in front of him was completely saturated with the energy of the monster, and his amulet reacted to this energy, immediately shining bright purple. But it was not so simple. On that wall, completely saturated with the energy of the monster, there was not one entity. There were several, most likely to confuse the traces. It looked like people who had been doused with paint. Seeing one of these entities, the boy noticed that it was watching him closely, as if in a cocoon of formless liquid. And when he saw it, Chang Zai-kun began to look closely. The young man was pleased, because this was the same entity that had attacked him. There was no fear in the boy's eyes, only determination, and a kind of favor towards the monster, as if it liked them. And Chang Zai-kun did not want to harm the monster. And then the boy rushed straight into hell, into the very center of this substance, and it in turn began to pull him with its energy, like tentacles, taking the whole body of the boy in its arms, and the slaughter began. The entity realized that it was detected and decided to try to escape, but the young man did not allow it to happen, and the boy warned it not to even try. The entity rushed up the mountain but did not have time to escape. The guy immediately caught up with her, and yes, judging by the forms, the entity was female. But what was strange, despite all the proportional orientalism of the body, legs, waist, head, the entity had no hands but long, lush forms. Our hero also realized this. The monster was really quite pretty. Chang Zai-kun did not expect it from himself, and involuntarily looked at the girl. He seemed interested in his new acquaintance. Although the monster looked like a girl, it was more of a monster. Its legs were like daggers. It had no hair but 3 eyes, no arms, and the most distinguishing feature was its red skin color. The guy smiled and said that he would be embarrassed if she continued to flicker her legs in front of him. He was a master of compliments. Even in battle, he didn't waste time on jokes. But judging by the look in her eyes, this compliment did not appease him, but angered the girl. Her eyes began to burn with yellow light, squeezing her eyes shut. The entity began to plan a counterattack on Chang Zai-kun. In the young man's mind flashed that it is not necessary to provoke monsters. They are dangerous, but immediately rejected these thoughts. Because it was not a provocation, he just made a compliment from the bottom of his heart and continued to look at the entity with his unusually purple eyes. But while the boy was flying in his thoughts and looking at his new friend, the entity wasted no time and was already rushing towards the boy at full speed to strike him. It was angry, so the young man decided to use energy without delay. As soon as he said this, the amulet seemed to react to his words, and a bright purple light came out in all directions. The amulet seemed to come alive. The light was pouring out in all directions from this device, and the amulet itself was very similar to an eye, but not at all like a human eye. Looking at the reaction of the young man, the amulet caused unpleasant feelings. It was like an octopus. It started its lines on the body of the boy, and the light from this device was pouring more and was brighter. These lines did not stop at the neck. They went to the arm, along the veins, showing them all on the surface. A very bright purple glow came from the arm. It completely enveloped the body, as if merging into one. The young man's hand and himself began to change. His eyes glowed, brighter than ever. Eyes of this color are impossible to find in an ordinary person. It is all thanks to the amulet that Chang Zai-kun wears. This amulet gave him great power, and the power to defeat a monster, even being a monster himself. The tentacles came out of the boy's body. His gaze became balanced, completely focused on the target, and this amulet changed the boy in a second. The entity did not expect such changes. It did not think that an ordinary guy would suddenly have such abilities. It did not have time to react and run away because of this hiccup or to defend itself, and the tentacles grabbed its leg, but did not stop there. The tentacles stretched to the whole body of the monster. It was the first time he had ever used the power, and he hadn't expected such an effect, but it was hard to believe, because he immediately touched his hand and was distracted. The young man liked it. He was proud of himself. This power was called tentacles, but he wondered if it would be considered sexual harassment of the entity. But the hand suddenly spoke and asked him to put his thoughts in order. Meanwhile, the tentacles of the tentacle were about to close around the monster's leg. Its leg was rather oddly shaped compared to the human leg, which had feet, so the monster relied on thin limbs. But then the boy's eyes were frozen with surprise, and pieces of its tentacles appeared around him, as if the girl had escaped from its tentacles, and Chang Zai-kun was still looking at the monk in awe. The monster broke free of its grip and rose up, threatening to hover over the boy, who was shocked to say the least, and her energy gathered around the girl. The girl rose high into the sky, hovering over Chang Zai-kun, and behind her was the full moon. The entity did not think to give up, which surprised the guy and seemed to inspire respect. He met an equal opponent, but the Chang Zai-kun was not going to retreat so quickly and released its tentacles in her direction. But not long the monster was at large. The tentacles again began to wrap around her body. It was clearly not like the girl. She began to get angry, and the tentacles began to catch up with her faster and stronger. The boy was pleased with himself, and he admitted that he really liked how stubbornly the entity resisted. Even though it did not give any result, the boy was pleased with himself. He enjoyed his strength. Now the young man was more proud of himself than ever. He thought that by saying this remark he looked like a real thief. The entity in his hand asked the master to concentrate again. What was unexpected was that the entity began to grow in size, expanding its body, freeing itself from the shackles of the young man's tentacles. It began to change, to transform, to become more and more shapeless and more like a huge mouth with teeth. It was like a funnel of death. Anyone unlucky enough to get into it had no chance of survival. But this was not the end of the transformation. Another mouth began to emerge from that mouth, though smaller and not as ominous as the monster, with the same row of teeth and tentacles with suckers like an octopus. Now it wasn't the girl he had been looking at recently that was rushing towards him, but a shapeless monster with many teeth that held only death. The young man's tentacles turned towards him as he looked at the new monster. This was his main mistake, because of his recklessness, the young man missed the blow that the monster struck, and the force of this blow threw Chang Zai-kun back several meters. This was a big mistake. The mouth sank into his body with its teeth, and blood came out of the boy's mouth. He thought it was the end. Was it really death? Now, from a different perspective, it is possible to evaluate the changes of the monster. It was a huge mouth, which can easily fit more than one person. Seeing how death is not passing, how the guy is dragged into hell itself, he already thinks that he will die right here, at the hands of this bloodthirsty monster. The teeth from the mouth are almost touching his face. It will strike fear into anyone. Even the amulet has stopped glowing, and his eyes glaze over at the thought that this is his end. There is no escape from this embrace of death. Literally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, seeing the contents of the mouth, the guy begins to reproach himself for what he agreed to do this job for. That's what resulted in such an attachment to monsters. Because of his curiosity, now he will live. It's a beautiful sunny day, just right for a walk, and most people are walking around looking at their phones. One of these people is our main character, whose name is Chang Zai-kun. He is an ordinary high school student. Now the question arises how an ordinary student could get into such a dangerous story. Paying attention to the guy's physique, we can see that Chang is tall, medium build, with short hair and curious purple eyes. With them, he can see things that are not available to other ordinary people. Perhaps this explains their color. The young man sees strange creatures. For the boy, it is a common thing. Now accustomed to such creatures, he does not even pay attention to them, although the monster in the sky does not look very attractive. A large eye, even larger claws and tentacles, and on the body jagged like a dragon. Others, not even suspecting such a guest, calmly go about their business, and Chang, even seeing, behaves indifferently. Even being a little boy, and seeing this creature for the first time, the boy was a little scared. But he was more surprised that the characters of fairy tales were real, and only Chang could see them, while the others went on their way, not even paying attention to the boy. But then the boy realized that he was the only one who could see these creatures. For the others, it was just another day, another landscape, and only he knew what was there. In front of the boy was a monster. It was gigantic, had 3 eyes, a huge mouth with teeth like daggers, horns like a bull, and a huge tongue, also with teeth. Anyone else would have been scared to death or driven mad, but not this child. He enjoyed seeing such a miracle. Chang, with his childlike delight and wonder, could not take his eyes off what he saw. He was attracted to these creatures, although he would not tell anyone about it, because in our world they would think he was crazy. Walking past people on the street, Chang thought that everyone thought he was strange, even his own parents. But that didn't bother him. They even let him live alone in a rented apartment, and didn't even ask if their son would come to the spring festival. But the young man was jolted out of his thoughts and turned to the side as if he had seen something. In front of Chang Zai-kun there were red spots, very similar to blood, and they led away from the main street. And that's what distracted Chang. They were the monster's footprints, and they were strange, like blood. The boy ran into the street where the footprints were leading, hoping to find the monster there. The footprints were glowing red and growing larger, and some strange liquid like fog was coming out of them. The boy ran into the street, a not very friendly, dark place. But then, a creature very similar to an octopus flew at the guy's face. Chang did not expect it, and was a little scared. The monster, unlike his relatives, was not scary at all, not strange in appearance if you compare it with that red monster, which had no arms. This monster was fully equipped. But having picked up this little creature, There was no trace of fear left. The octopus sat quietly and waited for the reaction. The boy admired the creature and asked if he could pet it, but the octopus was scared, perhaps because it was afraid of humans. And being very frightened, the creature ran away from Chang as fast as it could, and he ran after it, trying to stop it. The only thing that distinguished the octopus from the others was that it had one big eye, and it understood what was happening, and it ran quite fast. But then, out of nowhere, a girl appeared, blocking Chang's path, and curiously asked if he could see the monster's footprints. The girl was calm, but where could she have come from in a deserted street, especially where monsters walked? The girl was quite interested in the fact that the guy is not afraid of monsters. You can describe the girl as follows. She has short hair, 2 curls that fall on her shoulders, gray-pink color, blue marks under the eyes that shine beautifully and emphasize the image, an unusual dress that shimmers from yellow hot to purple, decorated with colorful stones. The image is completed by something like wings behind her back. The girl was holding the same octopus in her arms and calming it by stroking it. The boy was speechless when he saw her. The only thing he could think of was how beautiful the lady was. His pupils dilated, which meant that Chang really liked the girl. He opened his mouth in surprise. Even though her eyes were closed, he could still feel her penetrating gaze. She must have sensed his thoughts and smiled to herself. The girl was really pretty, even cute. Chang was so excited that his heart began to leap out of his chest and he grabbed himself by the gate. The guy admitted that he had never seen such a beautiful girl, and at that time a familiar feeling in his heart told him she was definitely not human because she approached the monster too calmly and stroked its eye, and the monster did not attack her and did not run away, which meant that she was some kind of creature in a human body. The guy was silent, but the girl continued and offered Chang to work for her. And without waiting for an answer, she said that she saw the answer in his expression, and she did not expect that there are still people in the world who love monsters so much. The guy was still a little shocked, but he started talking and asked if the job she was talking about would allow Chang to communicate with more monsters, or rather, if he would deal with them at all. The girl, summoning something like an energy sphere in her hands, replied that her job was to find the last monsters in the world in order to bring them back to safety. And if Chang agrees to take the job, he will have more than enough opportunities to communicate with monsters. Of course, the girl promised to provide the necessary assistance in the case and reached for her chest as if to show something. Her curvaceous form diverted all of Chang's attention, but I think any guy would be distracted by a pretty girl. She took out the same amulet that was around the guy's neck at the beginning of the story. It was a magic amulet. She offered to accept the offer and work together. The amulet was glowing and beckoned him to take it in his hands. Chang Zai-kun now remembered why he had agreed to take this job, which was the reason he got into trouble, but at the time it seemed quite interesting and promising to him, and a way to fulfill his dream. This job was to live with monsters side by side. There are so many of them, different, and all of them can become friends. Winged, toothy, shaggy, all of them. If you make friends with them, people will not have problems with them, and monsters will stop not only being afraid but also harm them. Chang came to his senses, looking in front of him, and asked someone if he was a new human employee. It was clear that the guy was not feeling very well. The person standing in the shadows only said that lying on the ground and avoiding work was not a professional attitude to work, and the monster meanwhile had already returned to its previous form and was standing right behind the shadow. But then, taking Chang's face in its hands, the shadow said that if he really loved monsters, he should save them. The boy saw a young girl in front of him, looking stern and worried about where she was coming from and who she was, and she had beautiful short purple hair, standing right in front of the boy's face. And the guy, as if not hearing her, just looked at the new acquaintance as if fascinated and asked who she was and said that it was dangerous here. He seemed to be in a trance after what had happened, or maybe he hadn't recovered from the shock and still looked at the stranger in front of him with the same interested look. Meanwhile, the monster, not wanting to let go of this opportunity, rushed to attack. The monster's eyes burned with hatred. It only wanted to kill them. The boy did not see this because his back was to her, but he continued to say that she needed to be careful and looked fascinated. But the girl saw the attack, and the leg brought over her, still aimed directly at her head. And because the girl saw everything, she was able to react in time and took Chang under the arm and jumped to the side. The girl was surprisingly strong because she could easily lift the man, and the monster missed falling directly into the road with his foot and left only a hole and stones. The girl turned to Chang and did not miss a moment to tease him for warning her about the danger, but instead he almost got into trouble again. Quickly running away from the monster, the girl said that if she had not come to his aid in time, the guy would have died of bleeding. And indeed, the whole t-shirt was soaked with blood. But when Chang touched the wound with his hand, he was shocked. It was healed. The amulet was still safely around the boy's neck, and the girl was holding his hand on his chest, where there was a large wound from the monster's bite. It seems that the phrase that scars adorn a man is not for Chang. He not only did not like them, he considered them ugly. But it was already done. Thanks to the monster's teeth, he would have that very horrible scar across his chest. Thinking of his boss, Chang thought that it was probably her who sent the girl to help him. He could not have imagined that she would be so attentive, so this proves that she needs Chang now. Chang was pulled out of his thoughts by his rescuer, who asked for permission to tell the boy that she was not responsible for dealing with monsters. It was a skill to speak at such a speed, and Chang was only silent while listening to her, looking ahead, while the dangerous place where he had almost died was getting further and further away. The girl continued to talk, and turning to Chang, she said directly that to cope with the monster, he must rely only on his own strength and abilities. This was the last thing the girl said, because at that moment, the monster came out of nowhere, using his foot like an axe, and cut off the girl's head, so fast that neither her body had time to save her nor the boy had time to react. The girl's head, exactly cut off, flew in the other direction, away from this company just like that, trying to save Chang Zaikun's life. It was enough to be distracted for 1 second and lose your vigilance, and you are already without a head. The monster was very strong. She was able to cut off the head with one precise blow. The girl's body began to weaken. She let go of the guy's hands right at breakneck speed on the sidewalk. The guy fell down with a strange curiosity, began to look at the legs of the monster. What is most interesting is that she leaned on the very thin limbs of the legs. It was interesting because to keep the balance on such long limbs was almost impossible. It must be a magician, or as in this case, an ordinary deadly monster. And then suddenly the severed head of the girl spoke. She shouted to the guy that she was not dead so that he would not fall into a stupor. Who is she if even after that she did not die? For a normal person it would be the end. No chance. Chang, meanwhile, slowly getting up, said that he did not fall into a stupor, and studying the monster he realized how to stop it. Chang Zai-kun was a very observant guy, and in this situation it helped him out well, because in such a danger, attentiveness and observation are the main trump cards up his sleeve. The guy was not worried. He could always clearly see the monsters. At this time, the amulet around Chang's neck shone bright purple and made lines on the sling. The guy's eyes also shone with a bright light. His whole aura shone. The monster wasted no time in attacking the young man with a wild scream and angry eyes, and her mouth began to appear again, her tongue coming out and pointing straight at the boy. She only wanted victory. But Chang did not move. He silently watched as the angry monster rushed towards him, wanting to tear him to pieces or eat him, as luck would have it. Chang continued to stare at her meanwhile. Energy flowed through his body and the amulet shone as strongly as ever. When the monster was very close, Chang suddenly told her to be careful not to fall, and under the monster's feet was a rope, not an ordinary rope, but one that shone with the same glow as the amulet. But it was too late. The entity did not see it and tripped over this rope. It was still trapped, which it did not expect. At the same moment, this rope began to wrap around the entity's tongue. With this tongue, it inflicted a fatal wound on Chang Zai-kun, who survived thanks to his ratiocination. And then she began to take on the monster itself, entangling its neck, tongue, legs, and holding it firmly in a sitting position, looking at the boy with anger. Chang wasted no time in using the amulet to its fullest. He used the energy to absorb the traces and restore them. The web from the amulet began to rise higher and higher up to his eyes. This was the first ability he received from the monster called shock threads. These threads are not ordinary fragile webs. They have great energy to fight monsters. Now you can see how big these threads are. They took up all the free space, and coming from Chang's hands, they all closed on the monster's body, keeping her at bay. But that was not to be. Suddenly the monster began to burn like fire, heating the threads more and more. And from such a high temperature, the threads could not stand and began to melt. And the girl just sat there waiting. Chang watched as the monster, having burned his threads, climbed high up the mountain, leaving smoke behind, and managed to escape. And then the girl's head screamed from somewhere, warning that the monster had switched to badger mode and they needed to get away as soon as possible. But the guy didn't seem to hear her, just watched as the monster brought its deadly foot over him with all its strength and speed, clearly intent on killing Chang, but he didn't seem to care. But his amulet reacted differently. It glowed with a bright purple and violet light, as if angry at the monster's tricks. The monster stopped and watched this jewelry with interest, waiting to see what it could do, and new threads quietly gathered around it. In 1 second they were tightly wrapped around her body, and the monster was shocked while the boy was watching, completely concentrated on this power, and guided it. The monster remained frozen with her leg over Chang. The guy tangled her in the threads as tightly as possible, picked her up. The monster obviously did not expect this and began to struggle to get out, but the guy was calm as ever. He began to stare at her, but for some reason with pity that broke his heart. He did not want to hurt this entity, but he was in no hurry to withdraw his power. Looking more and more closely, the monster seemed to feel uncomfortable, froze in place, eyes wide open. But Chang did not pay attention to it. His heart was broken not only by her screams but also by the scarred legs he noticed. It was impossible to tell from the marks she left on the ground or on the wall. Only red streaks were visible. If anybody else could have seen these marks, there were two possible reactions. Either they were just scared or they thought there was a fight, and the victim was dragged into the street and left. It's the same as if a person walked on a sharp pile of gravel. These were blood marks. In this picture you can see this entity climbing up the mountain and leaving blood marks behind. Others might not have seen them, but Chang Zai-kun noticed them while he was lying at its feet. And they came into view because of their curious shape. The creature's feet were clearly not adapted to walk on human roads. Chang chastised himself for being fascinated by her figure, for not noticing it at first glance, and began to withdraw energy a little, loosening the grip of the threads, and the monster watched fascinated. Nothing in the world could even come close to that discomfort. But no one could understand the pain the creature was feeling. No one could heal those bleeding wounds, which is why it was so angry, its mind clouded with anger. Chang Zai-kun tried to calm her down, telling her that everything was fine. His eyes were already shining faintly. Looking directly into the creature's eyes, Chang Zai-kun offered to go home with him, where he could heal her legs, and with a smile he decided to make her feel comfortable, to do everything he could to make her trust him. The monster squinted her eyes, seemingly agreeing to the offer, and she seemed to like the guy. Her eyes said that she was in love with him. Meanwhile, the girl was already attaching her head back to her body. She clearly did not understand what all this meant. The girl was surprised by such a sudden change in attitude. The girl attacked the guy first, not understanding why people should block the blows, not dodge them. If the monster was going to counterattack, She knew for sure that from that distance a person would die in a second. The guy clearly did not understand the reason for the claim, but remained silent. Immediately, the girl turned to the monster in the boy's arms, saying that this was not the behavior of an entity. Was this the reaction of a monster? Was this the little girl who had never been in love? The monster was clearly as shocked as the boy. Turning around with the entity in his arms, he said them, though they were addressed to the girl, so that she would not pay attention and not be afraid. She was just jealous that she had a close friend. But the girl denied such arguments. The woman who had been standing aside all this time, offering the job, just laughed at the comedy but pulled herself together and got down to business. Now she was sure that the boy was telling the truth when he said that he always saw monsters clearly. As it turned out, she had arranged a test for Chong, and the test proved that the boy was indeed capable enough to work with them. But then a girl screamed, denying everything, because she was also a monster, but Chong did not understand her feelings. It seems that Guan Shou does not like Chang Zai-kun at all, and she is ready to do everything to keep this guy out of their team. The girl did not even hide. She openly showed her dislike for Chang Zai-kun, and immediately crying, she ran into the arms of her mentor, who only laughed, but said that the guy was strange, and let him try to go down to the underworld. The girl seemed to be bluffing, turning to the boy to show that she had outsmarted him, and the woman continued, offering to do what they had agreed. She said that she would take Chang to the house where the monsters lived so that he could see their daily lives, and she was ready to introduce him to them. It seemed that Wan Ren had decided to trust Chang Zai-kun if she decided to show him the place where all the monsters lived, perhaps because Chang Zai-kun had not killed the creature but had decided to help it, and thus proved that he did not want to fight the monsters. The guy was beaming with happiness. He had been dreaming about this meeting for a long time, and he had already imagined how it would go. He imagined how he would be able to approach everyone, talk to them if possible, find out what kind of monsters they were, and maybe make friends with them all. Everyone came to a place that looked like an underground parking lot, a common place for cars that exists in every big city, but this parking lot was empty. The woman led everyone to a car. It looked very old, and now you could see that the woman was glowing. Maybe it was her aura. She took hold of the door handle, about to open the car. It looked like it was a long way to the place where the monsters lived, and they had to go, but who would drive this car? As she opened the door, Jun Ren gestured for us to get in. Sitting down in the middle of the car with the monster, which by the way was no longer in his arms, the guy joked that he could not believe that the girl could drive a car, so the question of who would drive the car was revealed. And the girl, clearly thinking about how to drive the guys, scrolled the keys in her hands and said, "Just sit and watch." She already knows what awaits him and decided not to warn him. Let it be a surprise. Slowly inserting the key into the ignition, the girl started the car, and then something strange happened because the ignition was a strange light. It is unlikely that this will be a normal trip. The guy just had time to say that he was sure that the girl did not know how to drive, as the car began to fall into a whirlpool that came out of nowhere and shone yellow and pink. And the car disappeared at the same time, and the portal began to disappear after it. Indeed, the monsters are not so easy to get close to, and they live far away. Without a car you cannot get there. Then, after passing through the portal, the car changed its appearance and became like a ship, and at full speed burst into a new dimension. After all, that's where all the monsters lived. The girls in front sat quietly. It was not news to them and not to Chang Zai-kun, but the boy was speechless. Now he did not even understand where he was. Chang Zai-kun had never seen anything like it. It was a strange way for him to travel. That is why Wan Ren did not tell about such a journey. First of all, it is unlikely that the boy wanted to get into this world in this way, and secondly, and most importantly, it would not be so interesting. Every cell of the body was delighted with the smooth movement of this ship through another dimension. It was so beautiful and unusual, like in fairy tales or science fiction movies. All the time they were flying, the sign on the ship's window was constantly changing, but the ship itself, following only one course, did not change. It looked like a giant monster that cut through the air of another dimension with its body. Arriving at the place, the woman reported this and began to literally walk through the wall. As it turned out, to get out of the ship, the door was not needed. Chang tried to get out as usual, but something did not work and he began to fall. When he landed on the floor, he looked up to look around and try to figure out where he was. And what Chang saw shocked him. Even more than the journey through the vastness of another world, it was like a fairy tale. Chang was presented with a picture of another world, a world that is closed to the eyes of ordinary people, a world he wanted to see so much, a world of monsters. But it did not look like what many people imagined, a scary, bloodthirsty place. No, it was not like that at all. There were trees of strange and odd shapes, mushroom-shaped houses, flying creatures resembling elves, a rabbit carrying a package somewhere, a horse drawn by a nobleman's worms, a girl walking her pet. Life went on at its own pace. Chung was shocked by the variety of monsters. He had been interested in them since childhood, and finally seeing them, he could not look away. But the monsters were indifferent to the newcomer. Perhaps the point was that Chang Zai-kun was one of them. At least it seemed so, thanks to his amulet and his connection to the monster. He could hardly stand it. He was almost squealing at how many cute monsters there were, but the girl didn't like his sentiments, and she tried to silence him. Distracting them from the brewing quarrel, the woman suggested, in accordance with human habits, to find a place to sit down and talk. When they arrived at one place, they were met by a monster girl who had something like a fishtail instead of legs and 6 hands, one of which held a mug. Upon entering, everyone saw the creature at the bar, who was offered another drink, but he asked to wait a minute while he finished a flamenco cocktail for the guests. The woman ordered a table for 4, and everyone went there. The room was quite spacious and quite beautiful, with a window in the ceiling through which you can see the beautiful blue sky, and the same bar counter stands on the scent. The whole company sat down at the ordered table, taking drinks with them. The table was beautiful, above the sofa on which everyone was seated. In pots were flowers, but not usual for people. Above the table hung a lamp that shimmered in blue, very similar to the model of the planet. And on one side of them, a window through which there was a beautiful refraction of light in gently pink tones. The woman took one of the glasses and squeezed out a liquid similar to a cocktail, shimmering in purple and blue. The woman pushed the drink toward Chang, urging him to try it, but Chang looked at the glass with some suspicion. In a transparent pitcher, the woman reached for the balls with tongs that looked like colored ice, which literally translates to rising moon. Throwing this ball into her glass, the woman began to talk. She said that this place they were in now was called Yuesheng, and she was the administrator, calling herself Jun Ren. Chang was surprised by this name because it literally means bitch, and he could not understand why she would humiliate herself by calling herself by such a name. But this name has another translation, rejected. Both translations in the original read the same. But Chang's thoughts and questions were interrupted by the girl, who told him not to use such homonyms. Guan Shou knew how the name was translated and had never spoken about it herself, and now she forbade Chang to use it. But Guan was calm. She was not confused by this translation into human language, and she was not offended by the boy's open thoughts, but she knew that her name said that she was approved. Chang didn't understand why she was so calm knowing about this translation, and he wondered even more why she was approved. Jun explained that almost all of the entities living in Yuesheng were strangers in this world. They had been expelled from another world. Even there, they were only strange alien entities. People could not accept those who looked different from them. A man went out to fight a monster that was several times bigger and looked dangerous. The monster looked like a big worm, its mouth full of huge teeth. One of the soldiers was already wounded and stepped aside. But despite its size and fearsome appearance, The monster was defeated and killed, no matter how much they wanted to be friends with humans. But just one mistake could harm everyone around them. They could not fit into any world. And Jun 7U considered everyone a complete failure because of this. But she admitted that Yuesheng was more like a prison than a home for them, but she didn't want to say why. But as she spoke, the marks on her face began to glow as if they were responding to Jun Ren's urging. But putting aside the unpleasant memories, she smiled again and continued. She wanted to officially entrust Chang Zai-kong with the search for the monsters. The marks under her eyes shone brighter, and she was completely confident in her decision because it was necessary to ensure the safety of them and everyone else. The boy had been sitting there silently pondering the proposal, staring at Jun all the while. This silence made the girl feel uncomfortable, so she asked again, and the boy replied that everything was fine, but he made it a condition that they would not interfere with Chang's approach to the monsters. Jian laughed cheerfully, though she liked Chang's eagerness, but this child should be there to work with him in case something happened, and she hinted at the girl who had saved him. Then she joined the conversation, introducing herself as Guan Shou, and she was a monster, also saying that Lady June had asked her to help with the monster search. But she, being older than Chang, would like to get to know the boy even better, as she suspected he was too eager to get to know the monsters better. Chang looked at her with an indifferent look, but the monster sitting next to her was a little worried. Meanwhile, Guan continued and, looking directly at him, asked him to name her special features that distinguish her from all the others. For Chang Zaikan, this seemed like an interesting opportunity to spite Guan's show a little bit, and he answered that she was almost human, which is quite special for a monster. Chang Zai-kun was pleased with his prank. As Guan was not amused, she began to threaten to beat him on behalf of all human women. The monster decided to sit back and not get caught in the middle of it. But then, an unexpected gesture from Chang extinguished her flame by taking her face in his hands, which surprised and alarmed Guan Shou. As Chang said, he would rather not be beaten. He took Guan Shou's head off his shoulders, saying that he had a slightly different method and preferred to start first. Guan just watched Chang Zai-kun's actions cautiously and remained silent in anxious anticipation because they had just met. Who knows what to expect from this guy? The guy looked at Guan confidently, and she didn't flinch from Chang, showing that she was not afraid of anything. This amused the girl a little. She felt funny that the guy could threaten her just by holding her head in his hands. Chang Zai-kun did not expect such self-confidence, but remained silent on this question, looking intently into Guan's eyes. And then at the same second he reached out to kiss Guan, closing his eyes, but the girl was completely confused. She did not know how to react to this gesture, but she seemed to like it. Guan calmly drank her cocktail, ignoring the couple, but the monster was furious at the prank. It seemed someone was jealous. The entity was even more red with rage. But as soon as Guan thought of answering the kiss, the guy immediately pulled away and said that he was right. Although it was cruel to play on Guan's feelings and emotions, it still worked. Lowering Guan's head, the guy looked away from her and said that it was a really strange feeling. Guan was shocked by this. She had just decided to kiss him, perhaps the first kiss of her life, and she flew with him. She had all the anger she could muster in her eyes. She was pissed off at the situation. Why would she test it? And the guy kept holding his head in his hands. Apparently, the girl was ready to kill him now. And Chang Zai-kun, leaving all the jokes aside, said that if she was really from this area, then she must be the majestic head from the story of Liao Jai. The picture shows a head attached to a guillotine, with a sinister smile, and two men sitting in front of it, one of whom looks like a shaman, holding a magic stone, while the other man was afraid to move in front of the monster. Guan was also able to pass through walls, scaring people, appearing in the most unexpected places. And it seems that Guan liked to do this, a kind of fun. Chang realized that her body was only a prosthetic, and he took off her head to make sure, a prosthetic that was needed to appear as an ordinary person and not attract too much attention, but in fact, Guan could control her body freely even when her head was separated from it. But Guan was not surprised by this conclusion. It was certainly not news to her. Putting Guan's head on the table and holding it there with his hand, or he would hit her again, Chang Zai-kun continued to think, looking in front of him. He remembered the stories of Liao Jai. It was said that her arm was also part of her body, unlike the other one, which was just a prosthetic. But then, suddenly, the head came up in the air and slapped Chang in the face, calling him a pervert and asking what he was up to. While Guan was biting into Chang's hand with all her might, the guy rubbed his face from the blow and mockingly talked about overreacting. Guan was on fire with hatred. While reattaching the girl's head back to her body, the guy suddenly said that he finally saw everything he wanted to see. After reattaching the angry Guan, Chang looked at her with a sly expression and finally said, "Her head is needed to outwit the enemy, but her arm is her real body." The girl's rage had gone over the top, and now she detached her head from her body and with all her strength, sweeping away everything in her path, she carried Chang off the ground, lifting him up to the ceiling. Jun Ren was not bothered at all, neither by their fight nor by the fact that the boy had smashed the window, and even more so by the fact that Chang Zai-kun was about to fall to his death from such a height. The boy had no chance. Coughing, the guy flew out, breaking the window with him, and rapidly fell down, and with him thousands of small particles of glass from the window. Now it was possible to look more closely at the institution, which was incredibly high. But something distracted Chang from the fall, and he was surprised by what he felt and saw. The guy who was supposed to be on the ground was still falling. How is this possible? He was hanging in the air, and the place seemed to be somewhere in the sky, judging by the fact that under Chang Zai-kun was a huge city that was burning with thousands of lights. Looking at this, it was already possible to understand that Yuexsheng was somewhere on the border between the world of people and another galaxy or space. And then, paying attention to something, the boy realized that he was not falling, because this Yuexsheng was really hanging above the city in the clouds, and it was actually a huge monster that was calmly holding on in the air. The boy saw the sky in front of him, where the round moon was peacefully lying, shining directly on the monster that was hiding behind the clouds, high above the city, which was now burning with dozens of nightlights. And looking at all this, Chang Zai-kun was both surprised and fascinated, and when he returned to Yuexsheng, Chang Zai-kun thought that there was nothing wrong with being able to play a fool in Yuexsheng sometimes. And then, once again, June spoke up, not at all bothered by the fact that Guan Shou had just thrown Chang out of the window. She really wanted them to get along and work together peacefully, but it seemed that Guan did not like the idea. And then, June announced her decision. It sounded strange, to be honest. She decided that Chang Zai-kun and Guan Shou should spend this night together. That's what. But neither Guan nor Chang expected such a decision. Although in truth the night was fabulously beautiful, full moon, stars littered the sky, romance in abundance. Upon entering the room, Chang asked with undisguised surprise if this was really her room. Despite all the expectations of seeing a monster's lair, Guan Shou's room looked just like people's. If not for the view from the window, one would think that they had returned to Earth, which surprised Chang. A bed, a wardrobe, a carpet, a table, everything you need for a comfortable stay. Chang Zai-kun could not stand it and said it directly, and Guan Shou did not seem to like his reaction. Perhaps she took it as a criticism of herself, or a hint that she had no taste. Standing behind Chang Zai-kong, Guan Shou slammed the door shut with all her might, clearly angry at the statement. The door and lock were very ordinary, which was unusual considering where they were, but it could be a portal door, or instead of a handle, a tentacle that needed the blood or energy of the room's owner to open it. Turning to the boy, she asked if he thought it was strange. With a certain excitement in her eyes, She rushed straight towards Chang, obviously up to something with a wild look and as fast as she could go. She brought her hand in the air above the guy's head. She wanted to catch him off guard, and she succeeded. And it seemed this time he was not in for a joke. This time there was surprise mixed with fear in the guy's eyes, seeing the determination with which Guan was coming at him. But she didn't aim for the young man's head. She swooped past him and hit the wall. Chang said that now was not the time for games. But what was scarier was that she had confirmed that the jokes were over. Things were getting more than serious. But Chang didn't like being cornered, so he summoned his inner monster with an amulet. Shouting "Blitz!" and tentacles began to appear from his hand, just like the ones he had used to stop the monster in the street. He shouted Krieg and sent his tentacles straight at Guan Shou. She obviously did not expect such a turn, but she did not have time to react, and the tentacles grabbed her and began to wrap around her. The girl struggled as hard as she could, but in vain. The tentacles holding her clung to her more and more and imprinted her into the wall. Chang Zai-kun was pleased with himself. He was enjoying watching Guan Shu's reaction. But Guan did not show time and pulled out harder and harder, and Chang ordered the monster inside him to absorb her power into himself. This confused Guan and made her even angrier. Chang began to be covered with red lines again, right from the amulet to his eyes, and the monster inside him noticed that although this attack worked, the master was still not Guan Shou's opponent. The map illustrates that the danger level of monsters differs from terrifying to blood awakening. First terrifying, then too dangerous, and finally blood awakening. After the owner has entered into symbiosis with his monster, he himself has become a monster, able to deal with the enemy himself, the level of blood awakening. Guan is already annoyed beyond belief, even though she is only responsible for supporting and interacting as a manager. But if she becomes too serious, her danger level reaches the third level, at which point Guan Shou's head separated from her body. Followed by her main assistant, her arm, Guan was angry and determined. Chang Zai-kun's tentacles were slowly letting her out of their control. But then her head and arm began to penetrate through the window to the other side. The tentacles could not keep up with her and did not have such a skill to pass through walls, and at times her body began to fall uncontrollably directly onto the carpet. Chang Zai-kun looking around, he realized that now it can attack from any side, but he was in no hurry to hide the tentacles and call off the monster. And so it happened while the boy was looking around, the girl attacked from behind and pushed him back. Chang did not expect such an attack. He fell backwards and landed face first on the carpet. Guan was strong enough to knock him down, and without any special effort or trickery, she managed to do so. He stood up sharply and looked around to hear Guan Shou's voice, confirming the boy's guesses that she could indeed pass through walls and control inanimate objects. Looking back, the boy saw that her head was looking down at him from the ceiling, and not only that, she was holding a table, a hair toy, pillows, everything that was at hand. Well, now the guy is really scared, even if it does not kill. But a couple of bruises will leave easily, but now Chang Zai-kun will know for sure that she is an equal opponent, and it is better not to anger the Guan Shou. And then Guan Shou's hand grabbed the guy's neck and pulled him back. It was even more unexpected. Crawling up to the boy and sitting on top of him, Guan explained that they had monsters. This was a welcoming ceremony. Sitting on top of the boy, Guan ran her hand over his chest and continued with a playful expression, "Their social status shows strength." If Guan was trying to seduce the boy and distract his attention, she was more than successful. The boy melted into her captivity. But the guy clearly liked his current position. The hand was still holding his neck, but not as tightly, and he was able to say he didn't know it, addressing Guan as senior. Looking the boy straight in the eye, Guan continued, "They are the world's managers, and the law is the same. Whoever is stronger is right. This is a truth known to all monsters." Now Guan was serious. She said bluntly that even though he had received the approval of Lady Jun Ren, she would still give him a total crushing, and she asked if he understood. But the boy did not answer. He stared at the girl, fascinated, as if no girl had ever crushed or controlled a young man like that. But then, gathering his thoughts, he said only one word, "Blitzkrieg," and Chang Zai-kun summoned his inner monster. And another tentacle came out of his mouth and straight towards the girl. His eyes lit up and his gaze became more confident. The girl looked at this appearance with some squeamishness. Guanshu did not like these tentacles. But then that tongue hit her right in the head with such force that she leaned back. The hand let go of Chang Zai-kun's neck, and he teasingly told the girl to show her exactly who was stronger and right. A drop of blood flowed from Guanshu's nose, and she was terribly angry, and she threateningly agreed to show it. She stood up to her full height and picked up all the objects in the room, including the piano and the wardrobe, and with a menacing but playful smile, she told Chang Zai-kong that if he was so bold, he shouldn't expect to sleep that night. Meanwhile, while the two were fighting in the monster world, morning came. And then Wan Ren came into their room and asked them cheerfully, wishing them good morning, if they had a good night. Well, judging by the bruises under Chang Zai-kun's eyes, it was very good. Seeing a rather interesting picture in front of her, Jun Ren froze in her tracks and stood silently, while Chang Zai-kun, suspended from the ceiling, said that instead of a sleeping bag, he would like a comfortable bed. He had a plate of breakfast in front of him, and it was hard to tell what it was, but the liquid in the glass was the same as on his first visit to the restaurant. Guan behaved aloofly. She seemed to have no appetite as she had only a glass of liquid in front of her, looking in a completely different direction from Chang, who was looking at her until he heard someone say something about a hard night. It was Jun Ren, she continued, and said that if Chang's behavior yesterday offended her, she would apologize instead of Guan. After his test yesterday, something happened, so she was all nervous now. It was a test to see if Chang had successfully merged with the monster in his chest, and he failed because if he hadn't had help, he would have died. Jun Ren asked Guanshu to show her what was going on. Guan agreed and began to undress. She also exposed her breasts, which seemed to be the reason for the death. But it attracted the young man's attention, and he waited with interest to see what would happen next. Almost undressing, Guan showed that there was a hole in her just below her breasts, and she explained that the monster she had been watching and keeping with her had disappeared. Chang Zai-kun stared as if fascinated and asked what the monster had been living in her chest and what it looked like. But instead of Guan, she answered Jun. It was the little monster that Chang had met when they first met. The monster looked like an octopus. His name was Nehru, and he was very curious, but June didn't think that would happen, so she left him with Guanshu. And Jun Ren turned to Chang and asked him if he would mind helping to correct her mistake. And Guanshu looked at the boy expectantly. But that's what the guy was waiting for all this time. Of course he would help. It's his job, which he agreed to do. Chang looked happy. And now it was clear why. He immediately asked when it was over if he could caress his little hands. Guan didn't like such sentiments and favors, but Jun just laughed and agreed without objection. Guan seemed to forget that she was half naked, and with all the severity she knew, she looked at the boy who had already pulled himself together, and said that before taking any action, he would like to see the place where this monster lived. Maybe there was some chance of finding some traces. Guan understood Chang's words and agreed to see where the monster lived and opened her chest more. She turned away a little and watched as the boy reached for the place where the hole was, but the boy said nothing. The boy touched the hole directly, cautiously, as if afraid of hurting her. But he was obviously interested in more than just the hole in Guanshu's body, especially after what happened last night. Chang Zai-kong had said that her prosthetic body felt just like the real thing, a compliment that Guanshu proudly declared that her creation could not be bad. Putting his hand in, he felt the touch of tentacles, barely noticeable but tangible. The guy was clearly shocked at the sensation. For some reason, the guy looked in the mirror that was right above him. He seemed to see something else besides his reflection. There was a huge eye in the glass, looking right at him. It seemed to be an oru, and it appeared just after Chang touched that tentacle. It was very strange even for the monster. The guy did not understand what was going on. But the eye did not disappear, but on the contrary, it was watching everything. Now, after all that had happened, Chang Zai-kun and Guan Shou sat on pins and needles, not knowing what to talk about or what to do. They even turned away from each other. Guan Shou seemed to be thinking about something, as if she felt guilty. Guan Shou spoke first. It was a difficult step for her, according to human etiquette. She thought she should apologize to Chang. These words were very difficult to say, but Chang understood and did not push her or make her angry, but remained silent in anticipation. But that was not to be. Guan attacked the guy, claiming that he should not have said something like, "Don't pay attention to it," or "It doesn't matter." Chang was surprised by this statement, but still replied that she did not want Chang to give her a break. But still, Chang did not miss the opportunity to tease Guan, and since she knew the etiquette so well, why not follow it? But Guan Shou replied without anger that people are mean and cunning, and with her understanding of people, she cannot let her guard down in their presence. She cited Chang as an example, because people should be afraid of monsters, but some people like them, and she didn't understand why. A memory came to mind of a girl hugging a boy from behind, tucking his Xiao Kong, and telling him that he was innocent, that it was the others who had abandoned him. It was Chang Zai-kun's memory, and it seemed to be a painful memory for him. Tao Ying quickly picked up the Xi and answered Guan's question. It's because these people have good taste. Guan was not expecting such a direct answer. Or maybe they, like Chang, had no friends, and the boy pretended to be hurt by the words, and she laughed softly. It looks like Guan added speed with her foot to the ship they were flying in, and the ship really flapped its wings and picked up speed. Guan thought about it and replied that according to statistics, the greatest threat is posed by people, not monsters. The guy was watching Guan's actions and facial expressions closely, but still he answered that he, as a human being, had to say something. Meanwhile, the ship was rushing through the expanses of another world. With a smile, the guy said that her tsundere side was disappearing, but the girl didn't seem to understand what he was talking about. But she realized that it was something about her character, and it was true, because tsundere is one of the typical variants of a character's character, when he initially behaves rudely, unfriendly, but later his sweet and gentle side of character is revealed. Usually, at the beginning of the story, the character shows his tough character and is in a state of constant conflict with one of the main male characters, but in the process begins to show tender feelings for him, and Chang Zai-kun is this victim, which is what he told the show's Guan. At first, she was ready to kill him at the first opportunity, but now she has become more calm and gentle. Guan announced that the guilty party had arrived and asked the boy if he could sense Naru's whereabouts. Guan Shu thought that the boy's ability allowed him to sense any monster wherever it was. Chang followed the girl out and looked around and explained that she was wrong and that he could see monsters clearly, not sense them from a distance. But the boy was determined and promised himself to find it. A huge red eye hovered over the young man. It was definitely somehow connected to the missing Nara. It did not just appear by itself. Looking at it, Guan Shou was not surprised, but she was curious about it. But Chang Zai-kong didn't say anything, just told her to follow him, and she was surprised. Chang Zai-kun started to run and told her that this giant eye appeared after he encountered his fool in the nest of the Naru. Chang and Guan stopped when they heard someone calling for help, and they followed the sound. In the middle of the street was a frightened girl, right under a painted wall, trying to protect herself from the very creature that Chang and Guan were looking for. It seemed that the Narus wanted to eat what the girl had, but after frightening her and being frightened himself, he ran away from her. Guan saw the monster and immediately rushed to catch up with it, running past the frightened girl, and the girl who was sitting there, now shocked, watched the monster being chased by a girl, but happy to see it. But she could not catch up with the monster. In 2 leaps, he ran across the road and hid in a street. Guan then saw where the Naru had run away, but when she arrived, he was nowhere to be found. The Narus had managed to escape. It was strange that such a small creature could run so fast, but maybe that was its advantage, and the number of small legs. Chang watched the eye and noticed that it turned its gaze to the side. Probably Narus was able to escape. It seems that even Guanshu could not catch up with him. Chang Zai-kun turned around and saw that the girl who had been screaming in fear a moment ago was now kneeling down as if praying, and it seemed that the boy understood what was going on. The boy realized that she had seen the monster, and the girl opened her eyes, almost crying, and asked if Chang had seen it too, as if looking for confirmation that she was not crazy. The girl kept repeating to herself that it was a monster, with crazy, frightened eyes looking in front of her. But then the girl really started to cry, and not even because she saw a monster, but because he wanted to take her betel nuts, which are not really nuts. They are actually betel nut seeds. They can even cause oral cancer or bad for the gums if consumed in excess. They are very popular in China. The boy repeated the name of the nuts to himself. The girl, hiding the treat, said that she really wanted to try them but was not allowed to, so she ran here, and the guy assured her that he was not going to take her nuts. Yi Chang thought about it. He had been told that Naru was very curious, so he probably just wanted to taste the nuts. And the girl said timidly that she did not even think she would meet a monster here and asked if Chang had seen it. The boy replied that he had not seen any monster, and the girl was surprised by this answer. She quickly apologized for her stupid talk about something like that. She had come so far, so she thought that at least there she would not be considered strange. And then Chang heard her words and remembered himself. How everyone had teased him, called him strange, weird, and there was so much anger in those words. In Chang's head, he kept hearing phrases like, "Why is he so strange? Has he escaped from a mental hospital?" And others would laugh at these words. For him, it was a stigma for the rest of his life. In the circle of friends, acquaintances, and relatives, everyone would consider him strange. But he was pulled out of his memories and thoughts by someone's voice behind him. The man was looking for someone and seemed to have found them. The girl was immediately grabbed by the hands of two men in uniform, one of whom said that the girl had tortured them to death with her escapes from the psychiatric hospital. The girl was desperate. She tried to break free, shouting that she had not yet tasted her nuts. One of the men said that they were harmful to her health and she should not eat them, while the other threatened to lock her in the cell. The boy just stood there and watched what was happening, but he was called by Guan, who asked him who the girl was. Chang replied that she was just a mentally ill girl, and in any case, he would never compare himself to her. Guan turned around and left, and Chang took one last look at the girl and said that they had to go, and he hoped they would find the man before he did anything. Then a voice came from somewhere and repeated the name of the monster after Chang. It was the same man who had been looking for the runaway, and he had heard the boy call the monster Nara. While the men were detaining the girl, the man ordered one of them to follow Chang and Guan, and they could only wait. When they came across the trail of the monster again, Chang and Guan ran to catch up with him, for the monster was quite fast. Stopping in front of a road, Guan Shu said that Naras had gone into a street with snacks. It was a rather large street located between high rises. Guan Shou turned to Chang Zai-kun and suggested that Naru was interested in human food. Chang Zai-kun replied that they were lucky that it was not yet lunchtime, so they could try to lure him away with food. Guan Shou looked at the boy and asked what kind of food he was going to use to lure the Narus away. As they walked into the middle of the street, Chang Zai-chuk and Guan Shou saw many stalls with a wide variety of food, and many people walking around, which seemed to be popular. And then Guan was shocked by the behavior of Chang Zai-kun. He quickly hid behind her, pushing her in front of him, and said that he would not approach the vendors himself. Guan was shocked by this statement, but it made her laugh a little, and she asked what had gotten into Chang Zai-kun, because he suddenly started acting like a man who had gone out for the first time in years. And Chang Zai-kun explained that he was good with monsters, but not so much with people, and that he was afraid of people. Chang began to shake visibly, either trying to calm himself or to mislead Guan, and said that everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. But Guan said in all seriousness that those were too loud words for someone who was hiding behind her back. And for that matter, as they headed for the stalls, Guan Shu ordered Chang Zai-kun to follow her. As she walked toward her first victim, Guan Shu added that her prosthetic body was made for this purpose, and she seemed to be up to something as she told Chang to watch and learn. Behind the counter stood a man in the form of what appeared to be a chef, and Guan Shu turned directly to him. After greeting him, Guan was determined to ask him to sell her some fried chicken. The man behind the counter was surprised by the customer's politeness. Pleased with her success, Guan Shu took the package of chicken she had ordered. And then, just like that, the scent of fresh chicken came to the doorstep of an aura sitting on the roof of one of the stalls. When he approached Chang, Guan told him that Naru was watching them, and Chang returned to where Guan Shu was pointing, but the smell of the chicken caught Naru's eye. Chang said that the Narus was looking directly at them, and Guan was surprised that it was really attracted to the scent of food and was pleased with the result. Chang kept a close eye on Narus, who was also paying attention to the couple. But it seemed that even the scent of freshly roasted chicken didn't make the Nara come down and eat. This upset Guan Shu, who almost cried because she thought the bait idea hadn't worked and they had wasted their money. She remained in place holding the package. Chang Zai-kun, on the other hand, thought that maybe he didn't like fried chicken, and maybe its flavor was too light, so he suggested trying something with a stronger flavor. Guan Shu agreed without hesitation and asked if he had any ideas. Chang Zai-kun pointed to the shelves and suggested that they try this. The man standing behind the counter, not understanding what was happening, just watched and waited. A girl passing by with a plate of manti turned to ask what the flavor was, but the man behind the counter was still just watching. In the middle of the street with the stalls was a place where you could sit down and have a bite to eat, and that's where Guan Shu and Chang Zai-kun stopped to rest, and it was from their table that the aroma spread throughout the street, which attracted passers-by. The dish they ordered is called luoxi feng, a Chinese noodle soup, which consists of boiled noodles served in a soup, a specialty of Liuzhou and Guangxi. Chang Zai-kun sat down in front of this dish, clearly enjoying its view. In front of him was a large tray with a picture of a rooster on it, and a yellow package lay next to it. Guyan was also looking at the dish with a noticeable appetite, and without taking her eyes off it, she asked Chang if he thought Naru would like it. Chang honestly replied that he was not sure, but he hoped so. And then the head of the Narus appeared. He looked out from the table, yet he was interested in this dish because of its flavor. The monster tried his best to climb on the table to get to the plate, but halfway there, he froze, thinking about something, and Guan froze in place so as not to frighten him, and asked Chang why he didn't eat even if he didn't run away. Chang didn't answer, but he noticed Naru's interested gaze on him. Chang Zai-kun apologized to Nara, but Nara just stared at him silently, making no movements and giving no signs. Chang Zai-kun continued with a guilty look, recalling their last two meetings, when Naru had run away as soon as he saw Chang. And then Chang's memory of holding a frightened Naris in his arms while the boy admired the monster came flooding back. Right when he scared the girl in the street, something so interesting that he had never seen anything more interesting before. And then Chang Zai-kun finally realized that Naru was hungry, which is why he was so interested in human food. But Chang Zai-kun thought that Naru was looking for an atmosphere where he could feel at ease. But unexpectedly for Guan, he addressed her as the eldest, which surprised her, and she suspected that Chang Zai-kun had another idea, and she wondered why he was addressing her so respectfully. As he put on his gloves for something, Chang Zai-kun continued, saying that her job was to look for monsters, and he had no idea how hard it was to do the Guan Shu by himself. So he suggested that Guan Shu should rest today and have some human food, saying that Guan was shocked, but turning to her, Chang held out a piece to Guan Shu. But for some reason Guan Shu refused, and asked why Chang wanted it, and looked away as if she sensed something wrong. But Chang Zai-kun, with a sly look, straightened his hair and said that he had an idea how to catch the Nara, so he offered to help him, to change the atmosphere. Guan Shou seemed to realize what Chang Zai-kun wanted her to do. She took a piece from his hand and put it in her mouth, and Chang Zai-kun watched with pleasure at the reaction of Guan Shou. She seemed to like it, and she closed her eyes in pleasure, and at least it tasted better than the luoxifeng. While Guan Shou was tasting the new food and Chang Zai-kun was watching her with Narus, people gathered around them. The girl said they were a very cute couple. The guy asked if they were on a date. And all this time, Narus was watching Chang Zai-kun with interest. Something attracted the monster in him. Our little friend began to change a little. Before he was completely purple, and now he is changing color to blue, just like the sea. What was unexpected was that this cute little octopus monster would turn into a beautiful girl with sky-colored hair. The girl looked stern. Her hair was flying in all directions. She had something like jewelry in her ears. Her clothes were almost transparent, and she sat somehow restrained, even stiff. The guy obviously did not expect such a turn, and Guan probably knew, but did not think that the monster would transform right now. She spoke in a strange language, but judging by her gestures it was clear that she was hungry, because she pointed at the plate of food. Chang Zai-kun could only manage to squeeze out a few words, no more, as he stared at the creature sitting right next to him as if fascinated. And then it became clear that even Guan Shou did not know that Nara could transform. She was just as shocked as Chang Zai-kun. When she recovered from her surprise, Guan Shou remembered that Lady Jun Ren had said that Narus could transform, but that he had to be very interested in something. But the boy continued to look at the creature. It was as if the boy had not heard Guan Shou. He could not take his eyes off the creature. And Guan Shou thought, if she remembered correctly, the shape of the naked man's body was what struck the soul of the culprit of the transformation the most. And then Guan Shou was already looking for an answer to her question about how the young girl from this transformation was connected to Chang Zai-kun. And then Nara began to say something quickly in her own language, waving her hands, showing something. But Chang Zai-kun did not understand what she was saying, and Guan Shou did not miss the opportunity to tease the guy and immediately asked if he was a self-proclaimed monster expert. Chang Zai-kun explained that he could reach a certain level of empathy, but knowing all languages was a superpower. So how could an average person like him, a fashion designer, get such a skill? Guan Shou replied with a sad look that just because he was what they call an average person, it doesn't mean that humanity has gone mad. And then Naru saw something that caught her eye, and she pounced on the guy's finger, surprising him, and Chang Zai-kun just froze in place, not even knowing what to do with her. I wondered what Naru was trying to show him. Maybe that she was hungry and trying to get his attention. Her eyes looked pitiful, like a child trying to ask for something. Chang Zai-kun didn't understand what was going on or what she was doing. Meanwhile, the girl was not going to let go of her finger, and she looked irritated because the boy did not understand her. She let the finger out of her mouth, licking it in the end. She seemed to be hungry, but for some reason she could not say so, only show it. Leaning on the table and closing her eyes, she began to sing long and loudly as if asking for something to put in her mouth. Finally, Chang Zai-kun realized what she wanted, and picking up the plate of food and chopsticks, he began to pick up a little bit of food. Grabbing some noodles, he offered to try them, and the girl didn't mind. With hungry eyes, she finally saw a piece of food, and she was eager to try it. Guan Shou could see that Nara was happy to be understood, but before she could even taste the food, she was violently pulled back from the table by something. A purple thread flashed around her neck. It was the same man who had taken the girl to the psychiatric hospital when she was afraid of the monsters, and he had said that monsters were very easy to find because they were really strange. This man looked like a true evil genius. He was holding the Nara with a strange gun that showed a thread very similar to the one Chang Zai-kun used. All that interested Chang Zai-kun was that this madman could see Narus, and it was very confusing to him. After all, even after the transformation, Naras was still invisible to ordinary people. But the thief didn't care about this question. He just said that it didn't concern Chang Zai-kun, but it was interesting to the man that the guy wasn't a monster himself, but he could see them. As soon as the thief shouted that he would take him with him, the guys who were with him as a team simultaneously fired their pistols with the same threads in the direction of Chang Zai-kun and Guan Shou. But having managed to wriggle away from the rope, which had gotten caught in a chair, Chang Zai-kun shouted to Guan Shou, asking what was going on. Guan Shou herself barely managed to dodge the thread and replied that she would explain later. She hadn't even thought they would meet them here. Judging by the conversation, Guan Shou knew these people and had seen them before. In any case, they were enemies, and the enemy's eyes were glowing red, so he was no ordinary man and he was a monster catcher. But then the Nara screamed and the thread around her neck began to tighten, hurting her. Chang Zai-kun realized that they were using the thread to drain the Nara of her strength and energy. The boy reached for his amulet and it immediately responded. A strong source of energy was found. Now the master could use his abilities. And the amulet shone bright purple, mixing with red. And in a moment, Chang Zai-kun began to change. The amulet began to work at full capacity. His eyes lit up with purple flames. Threads from him stretched up to his eyes, and his hand began to transform into tentacles. This added to the expression of the face not only formidability, but also danger. The tentacles immediately caught up with the enemies and grabbed them by the neck. They resisted, struggled, but all in vain. Their strength was great. The tentacles did not escape this madman, who was also grabbed by the neck. He was shocked and did not understand what had happened. He could not believe it and thought that Chang Zai-kun was not human. Opening his eye, which was glowing faintly with red fire, he could only squeeze out a scream and called Chang a monster. Chang Zai-kun just smiled evilly. Unlike the thief, the boy's eyes were burning bright purple, indicating his strength. The guy's tentacles threw the three men right into the ambulance that had apparently brought the uninvited guests. The blow was so hard that they were unable to get up immediately. Pulling back his tentacles, the guy said with undisguised pride that these uninvited guests had underestimated him and called them weaklings. Guan Shou watched this with undisguised admiration and thought that Chang Zai-kun was angry. She had never seen him like this before. Guan immediately told Chang that if their weapons were taken away, they were only ordinary people and could do nothing. Leaning over one of the victims, Guan Shou began to examine the eyes and concluded that their eyes were modified so that they could only see monsters. While Guan Shou was examining the body, Chang Zai-kun tried his best to calm the frightened Nara, trying to free her from the thread as she cried. And then Guan Shou noticed the car in which these people had arrived. The same girl they had met on the street with the nuts was sitting in the car, and she seemed to be frightened, shaking. Guan Shou thought that it was unlikely that the people who were being caught by these criminals were really mentally ill, and headed towards the car. As she opened the door, she was still thinking about the girl and thought that she was probably a victim as well. When she opened the door, she saw the girl getting out of the car. She was confused and scared, and she immediately asked if they had killed the people. And the girl immediately rushed to check her guess. And Guan Shou wasted no time in asking if the girl was okay and if they hadn't done anything to her. And then the girl angrily began to kick the man who was lying on the ground, shouting that he should not have touched her nuts. Guan Shou, Chang Zai-kun, and Naru just stood there unable to move from their seats in amazement. Distracted, she noticed that Chang Zai-kun was trying to free Narus from the thread and thought he was catching her. Naras really looked like she was being held by force. Chang Zai-kun denied the girl's guess and explained as calmly as possible that the Nara was not a monster, and he was not catching it but releasing it. The girl was surprised by this turn and held the same nuts in her hands again. Without saying anything about it, the girl just took one of the nuts into her mouth. It looked quite strange, not like an ordinary nut, but it was far from a nut. In 1 second, from a sweet girl who was scared almost to death, She turned into a terrible monster with a huge mouth from which came out an equally large tongue with teeth, and the girl rushed straight towards the guy. No one expected such a turn of events. In an instant, she became an evil, bloodthirsty monster. The girl was running at high speed, and Naru stood there frightened, unable to move. But Chang Zai-kun did not even show that he was surprised or frightened. Naru squeezed her eyes shut in fear, and Chang Zai-kun covered her by summoning his tentacles and using them as a shield, his eyes blazing again, and the monster's tongue sank into the shield. Wasting no time while Chang Zai-kun covered her, Nara transformed back into an octopus and ran as far as the eye could see. Guan Shou quickly reacted and yelled at Naras to hide in her chest, where he had escaped from earlier. Without waiting for another invitation from Naras, he hid in Guan Shou's chest as quickly as possible. Chang Zai-kun was fully prepared, ready for any attack from the monster. She was not confused by the sight of the boy. She had seen many things, but still did not hurry to withdraw her tentacles. The girl stood in front of him, not even thinking of attacking. She was in no hurry to hide her true face, and asked why the boy had lied to her, but Chang was calm. The monster did not hear the answer. She asked again why he said he did not see the monster's father, if he did, and then the picture of the first time they met on the street came to mind. She asked if Chang Zai-kun had seen the monster, but he said he had not seen anything like it. Chang only replied indifferently that he could not see it before, but now he could. The girl just laughed and said that it was enough to deceive her. She was already calm, even cheerful. Leaning closer to Chang, the girl said that she had felt it the first time they met, and said that they even looked alike. Chang Zai-kun involuntarily looked at the open mouth that was so close to him, and then the monster's calmness and merriment faded away, and the Verna struck at Chang's stomach, sending him flying several meters away, coughing. But the entity underestimated the boy's strength. He was already on his feet and ready to strike back. This made Chang Zai-kun angry, and he asked in denial if she thought they looked alike. Only now it is clear where Guan Shou has gone. She is sitting in a stall, watching all this, and concluding that she is also an enemy, and people will stop at nothing to conquer Yue Sheng. The girl was already looking at the guy with genuine anger, preparing to attack, and moreover, Guan Shou noticed that her body was changed much better than those who attacked her before. Guan Shou realizes that everything depends on her now, but right now she feels scared of the violation. First of all, she is worried about her because she is responsible for this monster. The girl thinks about different options. If the creature is stronger than they think, they will all die. Looking at Chang Zai-kun, she shouts that now is the best time to run away. It's the only thing they can do, and it looks like Chang agrees with Guan. But still, the boy refused to run away and summoned the power of Blitzkrieg, and tentacles came out of his two hands and headed towards the enemy. Chang Zai-kun was determined. But the monster was not so ordinary. It was able to strengthen its tongue and rush to attack. And then the tentacles of Chang Zai-kun began to intercept this tongue, and the tongue was quite strong. The girl was not joking. She was completely confident and said that there was no point in resisting. With such a tongue, she looked very ominous. But not only the tongue changed, she began to change. Her eyes became terrible. They burned red. The tentacles of the Chang Zai-kun continued to wrap around her tongue, but she did not care. But the girl offered to join her. And then something happened to the amulet. It detected super dense neurotoxins that seemed to be pressing down on it. The entity inside him told him to cancel the ability immediately, and the neurotoxins began to reach the Chang Zai-kun. But suddenly the boy was in a kind of void, like another dimension. Chang did not realize where he was, but he kept looking around. He was hanging in the air. There was no concept of up and down. Someone was screaming, calling for help. Chang Zai-kun looked around and saw a huge red monster with big eyes, sharp teeth, and a wide mouth. The same girl was standing next to him, yelling at the monster, telling it to stay away. When she saw Chang Zai-kun, the girl was already crying, asking if he also saw the monster, begging him to help her. She did not want to die. Chang turned away from her in disbelief, asking what kind of monster she was talking about and that she was crazy if she really wanted to evoke pity with such tricks. The girl was screaming that it wasn't a trap and she looked scared. Taking the girl by the gate, the guy angrily shouted at her to stop playing tricks on him, but she didn't resist, just closed her eyes. Chang Zai-kun was about to strike the girl, saying how bad she was, but the girl realized that she could do nothing. But then the boy looked up as if frightened by himself. Looking at his hands, Chang Zai-kun was horrified at what he was doing. He stopped himself. And then Chang Zai-kun realized everything. It was not him. It was an illusion. It was a farce created in his own form and essence. The shadow immediately spoke. Did he really realize that it was an illusion so quickly? Chang Zai-kun heard the same voice behind him, saying that it was a misunderstanding on their part, a great anger against them. He turned around and used his blitzkrieg power to send it into the very shadow. But then someone's hand touched his chest, and Chang Zai-kun didn't understand what it meant and was surprised. It was the same girl leaning against his back, reassuring him, saying that this place was safe and no one would bother them, and the boy could not even move from surprise. The guy was confused, but she knew he understood because everyone else thought Chang Zai-kun was strange, so she knew what to push. She whispered in Chang Zai-kun's ear and asked if he would fulfill her request. As she opened her mouth, soybean immediately rolled from her tongue and onto Chang's shoulder, beckoning him to join her. The guy listened like a spellbound man. Her words were like honey, sticky and sweet, enticing. Chang was in a trance, and the monster continued. She assured him that together they could end these monsters. The monster remained behind Chang Zai-kun, holding him, hugging him. The guy was in a stupor, still not knowing what to do. He could not even move. And then a big shadow moved away from the boy, and that huge eye was hovering over him again, looking right at him, and the entity was still holding him. It was as if Nara felt it all happening. She sat still in the middle of the Guan show. In fact, it looked like this. Chang Zai-kun intertwined his tentacles with the entity's tongue and froze in place with her. The two of them fell into a trance, their minds transported to another dimension. It was all a trick of the entity to deceive Chang. Watching them, Guan Shou didn't understand why they suddenly froze. She still didn't know the enemy's abilities, but this was a good opportunity to launch an attack. But then, at full speed, a snake burst out of Guan Shou's body, and Guan did not even realize what had happened at first. She was very surprised by this. She shouted through the window to Nara to wait. Chang Zai-kun was still in a trance, and the same huge eye was hovering over him, so Naru sat on the boy's head despite what Guan Shu was saying to him. Now, instead of the adult Chang Zai-kun, there was a little boy. It was him. There was no entity, no eye, just him. Alone with himself, he said he had always been able to see monsters as long as he had known himself. They mostly fly over a large number of people, sometimes fighting each other. People would calmly go about their daily routine, past the high-rise buildings above which the monster would hover, watching the world of people with interest, and they would not even realize it. But from time to time they attack people. For example, a girl who stopped in the middle of the road and looked at her phone can become a victim. At first, the little boy thought that monsters were the most frightening thing he could see or encounter in this world. But then the little boy encountered things that were much worse than ordinary monsters. They scared him much more. They were the shadows of the past, the shadows of the people who decided that he should disappear, the shadows of those who thought he was crazy, who mocked and abused the boy because they did not see what he saw. The entity made Chang Zai-kun remember that day. It wanted to win the boy over to its side by any means necessary, to break him. He remembered everything that had happened, and then an unexpected guest came. It was Naru. The eye, seeing her, seemed to be frightened and began to retreat. She penetrated the boy's mind. It was the Nara who snatched him out of the horrors of the captivity of fears and memories. But the entity was not happy at all with the appearance of the one who prevented it from completing its work. It was enjoying the blood of Chang Zai-chu and did not understand how Naras could penetrate the dimension. Its eyes burned with hatred, glowing with a red, devilish light. Naru pretended to be thinking and replied that the atmosphere had become very bad, bad, bad. The entity was not going to retreat and give up so easily, and Nara wanted to bring Chang Zai-kung back to life. She said that it was so peaceful, even nice. The entity was already very angry. Her mouth was all red. She said that she did not understand how Naris got into her psychic space. But now the entity wanted to eat the boy. That's why she was all red. The entity grabbed Chang Zai-kun by the arm and pulled him around like a doll, and shouting at Naru to get out of the way, threw out its long tongue in her direction with all the anger it could muster. Naru began to wrap her tongue around it, taking over her body completely. Naru had no chance to escape, and she could easily become an appetizer. But she didn't seem to be afraid at all, even questioning the entity, saying that it was angry. She realized that she couldn't accommodate two creatures at once, and she didn't have to, since Chang Zai-kun had already recovered. But still, the entity was greedy for food and emphasized that Naru's had entered its space. Naru was already being dragged into the very center of hell, the jaws with huge teeth slowly closing one by one, but for some reason she remained calm. And yet the jaws closed completely around the body of the Nara in a tight knot. The entity began to laugh loudly, almost hysterically, satisfied with its victory. Its face grew more and more frightening, angry and ugly. But Manaru was able to tear the shackles to pieces and escape from the captivity of the deadly tongue. The entity screamed in pain. Its tongue was torn into tiny pieces. Now it could do nothing. Naru remained as emotionless as ever, just silently watching the entity scream. Naru concentrated on pulling the bits of tongue-like threads together into a single piece. After finishing her work, Nara made a ball that looked like another eye, from which came a red light, and she clearly liked it. The entity was still angry and did not understand how it was possible, how Naris managed to escape and tear its tongue, which was now dripping with blood. She pulled the ball into her mouth and licked it, but why would she do that? And then she suddenly put it in her mouth, perhaps thinking it would be delicious. But she didn't seem to like the taste, and she spat it out immediately, realizing what a disgusting thing it was. It tasted like a mixture of human and monster, and then Naru realized that the entity could also eat monsters, which was a real shame. On the one hand, it was disgusting, but on the other hand, if she didn't eat the creature, she wouldn't be able to get back what she liked. Having released the Chang Zai-kun from its deadly bonds, the entity still could not believe that it could be wounded right in its psychic space. It was shocked as much as possible. And only now, paying attention to the Nara, the entity shouted directly, asking what kind of monster she was if she was capable of such a thing. The entity clearly expected to receive an answer to her question. Now Naris began to approach the entity with one eye, and the entity began to scream hysterically that Naris should not come near her. Now she was afraid of her and not of her, and Chang was watching her all the time with curiosity, why she was afraid of Naris. And Naris answered, "She is a monster, that's true, but she is a monster that cannot be defeated in the psychic space, whoever it is." Naris began to play with the fear of the entity, and after getting close to it, she laughed and pretended to think about eating the entity. Now it was clear why the eye had been accompanying the Nara all this time. It was a giant mouth that swallowed monsters, and now this mouth was moving directly towards the entity, and this huge mouth began to swallow the monster one by one. Well, that doesn't sound very pleasant. Now the entity felt what every one of its victims felt: pain. Terrible pain. Now the girl woke up. Her tongue was gone and would never be. She looked bewildered as if she didn't understand what had happened. Chang Zai-kun also woke up and was unharmed, and the monster inside him seemed to be intact as well. And then the girl fell face down. She lost consciousness, and now remembering everything, Chang Zai-kun asked himself what it was. Coming to a little bit of himself, Chang began to look at himself, and a voice behind him said that she had only suppressed his consciousness, but now everything was fine. Leaning over to Chang Zai-kun, Nara asked him to be more careful next time. Now she spoke in human language. As she got very close to Chang Zai-kun, Nara said that she had looked into Chang's mind and into his past, and it was quite interesting and cute, and Chang was even embarrassed. For some reason, Chang Zai-kun was silent and staring at the same place, not responding to anything. Concerned, Guan Shou immediately approached Chang Zai-kun, waving her hand in front of his face to check his reaction, and asked if he was feeling well. But then she noticed Nara and was distracted by her and Guan Shou and Chang Zai-kun. She was in no hurry to take her hand away from him. Naru was sitting on her knees, holding the edge of Chang's clothes to draw attention to herself, and she was clearly worried about him. Chang Zai-kun gave Nara a hard look and assured her that he was fine and asked her not to worry about him. He didn't want everyone to be distracted by him right now. The guy kept looking at the eye and began to think about the situation. Chang Zai-kun did not understand what had happened. He wondered who it was, this huge eye or this girl. Looking at the eye that was still hovering over them, the boy wondered who was the real one, or perhaps who was the master. But remembering how everything happened, he could say that they were one and the same, one entity. Standing under this window and seeing the happy Nara next to him, Chang Zai-kun realized that no matter what, the Nara is the most mysterious monster he has ever had to deal with. He fastened something very similar to a wutia on the legs of his old friend, but with straps that were perfectly sized and tight to the leg. The guy looked at his work with satisfaction, hoping that it would be enough, but Chang Zai-kun remembered that it hurt the girl to walk on the ground. She even left bloody footprints. The girl was lying on the chair looking at her new clothes, and she was only thinking about how these shoes would not bother her while walking. Getting up from the chair, she tried to walk. It seemed comfortable and she liked it, and Chang Zai-kun noticed that it was better. Now, she would not have discomfort when walking. They were in the same place where Jun Rei had brought him the first time. The girl looked back at Chang Zai-kun with a strange expression on her face, as if almost crying. But the entity leaned against Chang Zai-kun in gratitude, and he felt uncomfortable, so the boy asked if she liked it, and if she was happy, then Chang would be too. But something distracted Chang from the essence of the matter and trying on new shoes. In front of Chang, Guan Shou was surprised to see Guan Shu holding Naru in her arms, who was also surprised for some reason, and Jun Ren was sitting quietly holding a glass of drink. Jun Ren calmly replied that they were just surprised. Her symbols under her eyes were not shining as before. She did not look away from her drink, which was very similar to the one that Wan Ren had offered to Chang Zai-kun in their first conversation. But this time the liquid was more transparent and azure in color, with the same moonrise ice. The monster looked at Chang Zai-kong with fascinated eyes and said that the boy was one of the people she had met for the first time who got along so well with monsters. And Wan Ren stirred her drink and said that at first she was even afraid that she would get bored with Chang Zai-kun's company. The guy got to the bottom of the conversation and said that there are many stories about how monsters harm people, and that is why most people are afraid of them. For example, Chang Zai-kun mentioned snakes. They were also once victims of human neglect, but in fact they were quite timid, and people were attacked only for defense purposes. But still, there were people who live in harmony with them, are not afraid to pick them up. And birds, which were previously perceived as only one of the 4 pests, now live peacefully around the world. Also, people are afraid of the face and long legs of a spider, but in fact they are useful animals that almost never harm people. Put ethics above fear. This is the brilliance of human civilization. The guy smiled and gestured that he was sure of his words, and Chang Zai-kun was sure that there was a way for humanity and monsters to exist without harming each other. Now Guan Shou entered the conversation, and she said that there are bad monsters, and that it is in their nature to do evil to people, and there is no way to stop it. And all this time, Naru was sitting quietly in the girl's arms. The boy was sitting quietly and listening to Guan Shu. Guan Shu continued to say that, based on the truth that such monsters really existed, She wondered if Chang Zai-kun still believed that humans could coexist with monsters. Chang Zai-kun listened carefully to Guanshou's suspicions and doubts, and replied that people would certainly fight if there was such a danger, and they would not stop until they drew the line in the sand. Chang Zai-kun did not deny the fact that there were not very good people among the humans, but it was not easy to say, let alone admit. Jun Ren closed her eyes and thought about this conversation, and Chang Zai-kun's words, and the marks under her eyes glowed azure again. Realizing that Chang Zai-kun had alarmed everyone with his frankness, he decided to add a little optimism and began to assure them that not all people are bad, and that there are good and bad people among humans and monsters. Chang Zai-kun said that there was a solution to this problem as well. He turned to Lady Jun Ren and asked for her support, and the boy became more cheerful. Jun Ren looked over at Chang Zai-kun and confirmed that it was indeed her duty to understand and control dangerous monsters, and assured him that everyone here could count on her and trust her. With the answer he wanted, Chang Zai-kun wondered what happened to the guys who had attacked them while searching for the Nara, and whether he and Guanshou had done the right thing by leaving them there. Chang Zai-kun took some time to think about it, and if he remembered correctly, their gang was called the Moonfall Gang, and then the girl who had attacked Chang Zai-kong and tried to kill him reappeared, and she really looked confused now. The girl did not understand what was wrong with her, but she was tied by the hands to the ceiling, and half of her body was missing. Instead of legs, there were tubes coming out of her body, and there were many of them, as well as behind her back. A voice not far from the girl said that he was disappointed in the girl, and the voice was familiar. It was the same madman who had attacked the Guanshou and Chang Zai-kun company and tried to take away the power of Nara. Half standing in the shadows, the madman said that her defeat in the fight with Chang was a great shame for their organization. The man looked really ominous. The girl hanging on to the unknown tubes, addressing the man, Mr. Baron, tried to justify herself somehow. It seemed that the girl was afraid of this man. The Baron leaned as close as possible to the girl and said that her sweet face, which she had now, was not the same as when they first met. The girl was frightened by this conversation, and she remembered. A picture came to her mind, a thin little girl standing at the railing of a bridge. She was a victim of bullying. Her lips were dry from the beetle nuts. The drugs had paralyzed her mind. She was desperate. She looked bad, to say the least. Her eyes were in tears. Her lips were almost invisible. Her fingers were thin and twisted, and she was clutching them with all her might. The Baron helped her when he saw her in such a terrible state, but not just because he was sorry. He had his own motives, clamping his mouth shut. He said that he had let the girl merge with the monster. It not only cured her, but also gave her an impossible strength. Looking at the girl with eyes full of anger, he said that he had high hopes for her. They could make monsters together and make their power their own. Still holding the girl by the neck, the Baron continued to say that under his watchful eye, not to mention the barons and viscounts, the girl had every chance of becoming a general. It seems that the man was trying to oppress the girl as much as possible. Looking at her with his crazy, red flaming eyes, he said that he had given the girl everything, so much, and in return he asked only one thing, that she would not lose. Squeezing the girl's face so that she opened her mouth and almost screamed, the Baron continued to oppress her. He was angry that the girl had lost, why she had not been able to win, even with the power the Baron had given her. Forcing the girl to show the monster's tongue to everyone, she got it, and immediately began to apologize to the Baron, asking him to give her another chance. She tried to do everything to please the Baron, but the Baron no longer wanted to listen to her. She was not needed, as she had already lost once and ruined the whole thing, and the Baron simply tore her to pieces, his eyes blinded by the bright light. The girl was only one of many for him, a puppet in his hands, which the Baron skillfully controlled until she met his expectations. But now she was not needed. The Baron would create new ones. A huge tongue with many teeth appeared before the man again, from nowhere. It looked as if it was a separate monster, or at least its organ. It was lying quietly and not moving. Looking at it, the Baron noticed that the resources were being extracted too slowly. This tongue was on the same track that was traveling in an unknown direction. Along with other resources, monsters are the enemies of mankind. Their destiny is to become their resources. The opportunity to benefit people is a great honor for them. Looking at all this, the Baron made grandiose plans about how Yuesheng would fall, and then the whole world would belong to them. The order of the moon capture. Diverting his attention from the resources, the man looked at the phone. In his hands was the image of the man who had destroyed his favorite puppet, yet he really had high hopes for the girl. There was indeed a photograph on his phone, and it was of Chang Zai-kun. The Baron looked at his picture with undisguised hatred and wanted to meet him as soon as possible, calling him a traitor to all mankind. A school classroom. It looks like it is still far from the beginning of the lesson. Almost at the first desks, Chang Zai-kun sits alone, and behind him is a boy and a girl. The classroom is almost empty, only a few students. Looking in Chang's direction, the guy sitting behind him whispered to the girl next to him that it was the party boy Chang Zai-kun sitting in front of him. It looked like the guy hadn't been to school for a long time. The girl sitting next to him seemed to know what was going on and shared the information with her neighbor, who said that Chang Zai-kun had signed an agreement with the school that his attendance would not be taken into account outside of the final exams. In other words, the school did not care if the boy went to school or not, as long as he was present during the exams. The boy was outraged by this, even though it was a private school, but he felt that Chang Zai-kun was given too much freedom, and he thought it was not fair to the other students. It seems that this boy not only envied but also disliked Chang. But the girl seemed to admire Chang Zai-kun. She remembered that this boy had just recently transferred to their school, so she didn't know about this situation. Since Chang Zai-kun had entered this school, he had always won first place in everything he participated in. This guy's name was Xu Xiang. He was obviously very jealous of Chang Zai-kun, and he was hurt that he was second in the ranking and not first, and this envy went beyond all bounds. Thinking that Chang was a genius, he got up and headed towards the guy, wanted to check what Chang Zai-kun was capable of, and even with the help of force. At that time, Chang did not even suspect anything and was sitting quietly on the phone. The girl said that Chang Zai-kun's sports performance was also in the first place, and even the physical education teacher was weaker than him. This information abruptly stopped the bully. He could not believe it. And the girl indifferently continued to trim her nails. The girl advised him to just ignore him, because according to gossip, they said that in childhood he was constantly bullied by several children, and in the end, the kids disappeared without a trace. And Chang didn't react to it. Although it sounded like he heard them talking, he continued to sit on the phone. Chang Zai-kun remembered the last conversation with Wan Ren. She told him to live like an ordinary person. She didn't want his work in Yuesheng to become more important than anything else. Guan Shao listened to what the lady was saying with some sadness. Jun Ren said that it was just a job and she wasn't going to force Chang Zai-kun to spend all his time on her. She said that he should put his personal life first, and she wanted the boy to be happy, and it was obvious. Almost forgetting, Lady Wan Ren said that, regarding the information about the moon capture, she asked Guan Shu to send a video of her to Chang Zai-kun's phone and asked to see how she would have free time. Guan said nothing, just gestured that everything was fine, and Nara sat quietly in her arms. Well, these were not memories, but a video on the phone. That's what Chang Zai-kun was watching all the time. After this video message, he wondered who the organization Capture the Moon was. He turned on the video where Guansha was talking about them. Moon Grabber is a secret human organization. No one knows when it was created, maybe tens or hundreds of years ago. What is very interesting and unexpected is that all the members of this organization are not purely human, as they have already seen when their group was attacked by these very half-monsters. These people hunt monsters and try to appropriate their power in every possible way. Chung Zai-kun realized that these members of the group were a hybrid of humans and monsters, and he listened attentively. Guan began to explain that in order to gain the power of monsters, they surgically transplant their limbs and thus gain the abilities of a monster. Chang Zai-kun began to imagine it all in his head. He felt sorry for the monsters who were left without limbs because of someone's thirst for power. Their fate was not to be envied, for monsters with no limbs were considered waste and should be treated as such. Chang Zai-kun was shocked by both the cruelty and the information he received, but he could not look away from the phone screen. Guan Shou goes on to explain how it turns out that the moon grabbers have their own system of titles, from highest to lowest: Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, Baron. Recalling the girl who attacked them, Guan Shou thinks that she was not even a baron, but only a knight new to the organization, who had only recently joined the ranks of the half-monsters. Although titles are not determined by strength alone, Guan Shou is now convinced that Chang Zai-kun can hardly handle even a knight, let alone someone with a title. So if the boy meets someone from the Moon Rapture and he is alone, she advises him to retreat. The lesson was to be learned from the situation with the girl who attacked Chang. The guy was shocked. He didn't think it was that complicated. And then, distracted by his phone, he noticed that it was already dark in the classroom and thought that someone had turned off the light and there were no students either. Chang Zai-kun wondered. It was strange. Class had just ended. It must be the loudest time in school ever. And looking around, he realized that he was completely alone. There was not a soul in the classroom. When he left the classroom to look around, Chang realized that there was no one in the corridor either. Walking along the corridor and not seeing a single living soul, the villain thought that all the people in the school had simply disappeared. But it seems not so simple, and it's all the Baron's tricks he was watching Chang Zai-kun. The boy saw him in the window from the corridor. The Baron was smiling ominously. This smile did not bode well. So when Chang saw him, he went straight to the man. He was not afraid of him, and he said to him that if he came to school for revenge, he had chosen the wrong place. Chang Zai-kun realized that this man was from the Order of the Moon Capture, and despite Wan Shu's warning, he did not run away or retreat, but went straight into the mouth of the beast. The Baron stood looking at the man who was now his #1 enemy, and the Baron was very pleased that Chang Zai-kun had fallen into the trap that had been so cleverly set. The Baron even smiled in a friendly way at the surprise of being so quickly declassified, but it was deceptive and not friendly at all. The Baron said that he was very surprised at how quickly Chang Zai-kun realized who he was, and he was beginning to like the guy. The Baron acted as if he was really friendly, but it was just a mask. He said he was not here for revenge, and Chang Zai-kun had shown that those people were not worthy of being in their organization, and they were able to get rid of the weak link, and he wanted to invite Chang to join them. But Chang Zai-kun is clearly not interested, and without further ado, he simply asks the Baron to go away. But the Baron kept up, saying that because of Chang, they were short-handed, and the lack of assistance was a bit frustrating. The Baron's fingers were oddly shaped, as if they were made of thread. The Baron offered a straightforward offer to join them and take the place of the girl whose level wasn't even the lowest. Chang Zai-kun didn't raise an eyebrow, just said one word. He refused such a generous offer. He repeated what he had said before, but with a certain anger, telling the Baron to leave the school. But the Baron kept up and said that the boy did not seem to understand. The situation was becoming more and more dangerous. The Baron's face began to change into a grimace, becoming angrier and angrier, and he said, "This is not a suggestion, but an order." If Chang decided to refuse, he would be in trouble, and behind the Baron appeared the men who served him, ready to fulfill any order of the Baron. And that's not all. Behind them were all the missing people from the Skola. They took them prisoner and promised to kill them if the boy did not agree. That's really a problem. Seeing this unpleasant picture, Chang Zai-kun asked if they had really taken over the entire school and were now trying to threaten him with these people. And laughing, he turned to the Baron. Why did he think that Chang cared about their lives? They were just a stupid bunch. At first, the Baron became more serious than ever, probably not expecting such a response, but then he laughed out loud. He really liked Chang Zai-kun's answer, and affirmed that he had everything he needed to join the order, a moonstruck delight. Now the Baron's gaze became quite serious and dangerous, and he realized that by saying this, Chang Zai-kun wanted the Baron to let his guard down. And then, flying up to the ceiling, the Baron was enveloped in a red haze, and he rushed towards the boy with a mad look, saying that it was time for the test. The Baron's strength was quite strong. His feet remained on the ground while the other half of his body attacked. It seems that it was thanks to this fog that he was able to separate himself. Chang Zai-kun's eyes were blinded by the light from the red smoke, and he put his hand over his face, unable to see anything. But it turned out that it wasn't just the smoke that was giving off this glow. It was coming from somewhere else, as if straight from the floor, but it was still unclear who the source was. But then the light disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, which surprised the boy. Taking his hand away from his face, Chang Zai-kun saw that there was no one there. The corridor was empty, and he did not understand where the Baron who had just flown straight at him had gone. But then, standing by the wall, a web of smoke was stealing up to the boy's leg, straight from the wall, or rather, from the ventilation. But the boy did not see it. He was too interested in where the Baron had gone. Still, Chang Zai-kun seemed to feel it and looked down, wondering where it came from. Without hesitation, he summoned a blitzkrieg to free himself from the thread that had already begun to wrap around his leg. The monster he was fighting instantly responded to his master's call. As soon as Chang Zai-kun used the power, the Baron's voice was heard behind him, which scared the boy to death, and the Baron asked if he had been given this power in Yuesheng. The boy suddenly turned around and prepared to attack, but the Baron was in no hurry to attack. He kept talking and seemed to know a lot about this power, saying that the monster's abilities were very strong, and Chang did not even understand a small part of the full capabilities of his power. The boy understood that his power was great, but he did not seem to understand the only thing that was missing was how to use it all. The Baron hovered over Chang Zai-kun and began to whisper into his mind, saying that it was all about our consciousness, and Chang seemed to fall into a trance. But the Baron, repeating once again the great power of consciousness, struck the boy's head. The blow was very strong, and Chang Zai-kun was pinned to the wall, which cracked and crumbled after such a blow. The boy could not get to his feet. He was shocked by what had just happened, and he thought about the power that the Baron had used. Not every monster has such power. But now he could see that the boy was being held in the wall by tentacles that intertwined to form a very strong rope that could not be broken free. It was the work of the Baron. He had used the power to do it. Hanging from the wall, which was crumbling beneath him, entangled in these tentacles, the boy couldn't even use a blitzkrieg to break free. And now he realized that the Baron was indeed much stronger than him. Despite Guanshou's warnings, the boy had been stupid and hadn't backed down when he had the chance. Chang Zai-kun tried to contact his friends, but the Baron immediately realized this and thwarted the attempt. He walked busily in front of the boy, who seemed to have lost his last hope and was just hanging limply on the wall without even trying to resist. The Baron's eyes burned red as he looked at the boy, enjoying the powerlessness of Chang Zai-kun. He is Baron Johann, and he hates it when people interfere in his life, always telling him that he can't do it, he won't succeed. But they always give up and want him to give up. And leaning over to Chang Zai-kun, Baron Johann said with a sly look, he knew what strings to pull. He said he wanted to change this world so that everyone could do what they wanted without all this unnecessary advice. Looking up at Baron Johann, angry but exhausted, Chang Zai-kun asked what the Baron wanted from him. Baron Johann had been waiting for this question, and with a sly look he replied. He said that he wanted to take away Chang Zai-kun's blitzkrieg power. It's not that the guy was shocked, he didn't expect it, but he was scared, and he seemed to be thinking of all possible ways to avoid it, because the Baron was already many times stronger than Chang, and with blitzkrieg power, it was hard to imagine what would happen. As soon as Baron Johann sent out his smoke to accomplish his plan, and still take away the power he so desperately wanted, a shield of his own power appeared in front of the boy. It was a blitzkrieg but stronger than before, and Chang Zai-kun looked up at the Baron with eyes full of strength and determination. Baron Johann was shocked by what he saw. Only a moment and the desired would be in his hands. His face was twisted with anger. Chang Zai-kun easily broke the tentacles that held him on the wall and moved towards Baron Johann. He was strong and determined. There was no fear in his eyes, and as he walked, he said that as he saw the boy merged with the monster, thus becoming a monster himself, and the Baron only transplanted the monster's limbs. Chang Zai-kun said that the way they got their powers was radically different, which meant that their powers were not of the same level. The arm with the blitzkrieg on it started to change. It twisted, grew in size. Kolshi's hand completely twisted into the shape of a drill. Chang Zai-kun moved menacingly towards Baron Johann, and the tentacles broke off with each of his jerks. The Baron was now clearly scared to death, because he did not expect this boy to be able to find such strength in himself. And Chang Zai-kun said as he approached that Baron Johann was stronger, only because he used his abilities a little better. Meanwhile, the Baron kept trying to move away. Chang Zai-kun's hand was now close to Baron Johann's face, and he was both confused and angry at the same time. But Baron Johann was not going to give up so quickly, and turning his fingers into tentacles, he grabbed hold of Chang Zai-kun's hand, trying to hold on to it. He was confused and did not understand how this was possible, because Chang Zai-kun had been much weaker than Baron Johann recently, and he did not understand what had changed. But Chang Zai-kun was completely calm, and said that nothing had changed. He was just a good student in school, and he was good at monsters. Chang was confident and was not going to let Baron Johann go. Chang Zai-kun asked in all seriousness if Baron Johann had learned anything about him before attacking him. The blackout, the sudden flash of light, and the tentacle attacks from the socket. The Baron did not even realize that he had shown Chang Zai-kun that their abilities were similar, and that he had helped the boy think of a plan of action. Baron Johann screamed with rage that this was impossible, and no matter what Chang Zai-kun thought of, he threatened to kill him and tried to hold the boy with his tentacles from the wall, but it was all in vain. Baron Johann, already resisting with his last strength, may have thought about where else he had made a mistake, and Chang Zai-kun said that he was thinking at that moment, if Baron Johann could do it, why not he? Chang Zai-kun was proud of the failure, and proud that he had cornered the Baron and his power was growing. And then his monster spoke from the amulet, saying that now there was enough energy, and the master could shoot when he was ready. The amulet was shining, just pouring out energy beyond his power to contain. Chang Zai-kun didn't have to repeat himself twice. As soon as the monster spoke, Chang Zai-kun used his power to the fullest, and from his tentacles came out what looked like lightning bolts, which were very light, and the mad Baron Johann was shocked by this power. Now Baron Johann's strength was nothing compared to Chang Zai-kun's, and he screamed, either in pain or shock or both. Chang Zai-kun, looking on, told the mad Baron that he should not get in the way of his charged tentacles. Looking directly at Baron Johann, Chang Zai-kun told him that he wanted to do whatever he wanted. It was so arrogant, it lacked the charm of monsters. Chang Zai-kun looked at the Baron with a mocking look. Baron Johann was completely powerless. He could barely stand on his feet, not even raising his head. And some patterns appeared on his hands, the same color as the tentacles that held Chang Zai-kun. But when he raised his head, he shouted Chang Zai-kun, and Baron Johan's eyes were like the devil's. These patterns appeared all over his body, and Baron Johann seemed to be mad. His eyes were red as if filled with blood, and he shouted at Chang Zai-kun to prepare for death. But these changes did not surprise Chang. He even laughed at how angry Baron Johann was, and he remained calm, which can be more angry than an attack. Chang continued to make Baron Johann angry, saying that it was hard to keep his arrogance in check when he looked directly at him. Baron Johann changed before his eyes, telling Chang Zai-kun that by provoking him, he was making things worse, signing his own death warrant. Now that Baron Johann had completely changed into a monster, he did not look very attractive, with long red fingers, legs like roots, his whole body painted with signs, and on his back grew spikes that sparked lightning energy. He smiled ominously, like death itself, and spoke to Chang Zai-kun, saying that he took back his words. Chang Zai-kun was not suitable for the order of the Moon Caesar. Now Baron Johann was in a serious mood, laughing like a madman, almost turning the other way, shouting that now the only thing Chang Zai-kun could do was to become a material. By the way, while all this carnage was going on, it seems that all the people either ran away or hid to avoid the epicenter of events. Baron Johann did not waste words. Chang Zai-kun was immediately blown away by a stream of incredibly strong energy. Opening his eyes, Chang Zai-kun realized that Baron Johann had attacked him with lightning, but this did not seem to surprise him. And then the amulet spoke up, saying that monster energy was found in the air. The monster stood in the middle of the corridor, waiting for Chang Zai-kun's next move. Chang Zai-kun leaned against the wall, saying that he thought if it was lightning, it should have hurt more. And what an irony! Baron Johann considers monsters to be garbage, but still uses their abilities, and how he is not ashamed. This time it seems that Chang Zai-kun has managed to hurt the pride of the Baron, and he says whether he is ashamed or not, but that is not the boy's concern. More importantly, Chang Zai-kun also uses tentacles, and he can't wait to attach them to his own. He accelerated as fast as he could toward the Chang and shouted that he had to kill the boy first, but the Chang didn't bat an eyelid, just stood there leaning against the wall until Baron Johann was almost salivating with anger. But as it turned out, he was not just standing there waiting, feeling something on the wall with his tentacles. Chang Zai-kun said with a cheerful look and burning eyes that Baron Johann had forgotten that there was a source of electricity near him. Taking the wires sticking out of the wall with his tentacles, Chang Zai-kun pulled them towards him with force, about to tear them out. Chang Zai-kun was already seriously looking at his opponent, holding the tentacles of the broken wires that were under voltage, and said that there would be a short circuit. And then a flame broke out in the place where Chang Zai-kun stood. The Baron stopped and his red energy froze above him. He was waiting for what would happen next. And then there was an even stronger explosion of fire, as if a pile of dynamite had been detonated. And what Chang Zai-kun wanted to achieve with this, such an explosion could easily kill anyone. When everything calmed down and instead of fire and explosions there was only black smoke, and Chang Zai-kun was not visible at all, Baron Johann asked if the boy had hidden. Indeed, Chang Zai-kun, while Baron Johann was blinded by the glow of the explosion, managed to run around the corner of the corridor, and his monster became worried, telling his master that it was too dangerous. As it turns out, Chang Zai-kun tore out the wires to electrocute himself because he was literally glowing with energy, and it was more than enough for such an explosion, and the monster was seriously worried because with such power, Yang Zai-kun could kill himself. Yi Chang Zai-kun, watching Baron Johann, explained that they were about the same in terms of resistance to current, but in terms of physical fitness, Chang Zai-kun was clearly losing to Baron Johann, so it would be difficult for him to resist without being drunk on current. While watching Baron Johann, Chang Zai-kun sees that he is heading to the gym, away from the explosion site, perhaps hoping that Chang Zai-kun is there. But Chang Zai-kun thinks that the gym is where the hostages held by Baron Johan's men or half-men are. And Chang Zai-kun tries to think of something until he comes up with something crazy. And judging by recent events, the Baron is still capable of it. A full moon rose above the building, red as if it were blood. The sky was clear and strewn with stars. There was no one in the building. The view was mesmerizing, even frightening. In the middle of the gym there were indeed hostages, watched over by the men of Baron Johann who had just entered. One of the subordinates seemed pleased to see his master and greeted him, and asked if the problem had been solved, judging by the sounds they had heard. Baron Johann dryly replied that it had not, citing the terrible power supply in this place and the need for sacrifice to restore it. The marks on the Baron's body faded from red to black and his eyes became normal. The couple who had been discussing Chang Zai-chuk in class were now sitting next to each other, the girl telling her friend that they were going to be killed. The boy whispered in the girl's ear, afraid of being heard, that it was unlikely to happen to her. The girl was surprised by this statement. She did not understand why. The boy said that the reason was that she was the most beautiful and slim among all the students, and he was afraid that the girl would be caught and do something wrong. The girl really had a lush, well-shaped body, a beautiful face, and who knows what they would do. The guy just decided to dilute the depressing situation and make a little joke. He said how sorry he was and he was coughing to keep from laughing. The girl yelled at him, said that he would have better calm down. But then all the jokes and laughter ended because Baron Johann pointed to Xu Xiang and ordered him to start with him, and the guy asked him in disbelief. Baron Johann approached him as close as possible, touched his shoulder, and noted that the boy was quite strong. The boy was really strong. He and the girl had talked about it before. But the girl did not miss the opportunity to make a last-minute joke at Shusan, saying that the boss seemed to prefer boys, and she would pray for the boy. And the boy almost hysterically shouted that he did not like her prayers. This was the last thing the boy could say. He fell to the floor, and Baron Johann leaned over him like a hungry beast, putting his hand on his shoulder and draining more and more life energy from Xu Xiang. He fainted. The way the signs on the Baron's body lit up, it was clear that he had already drained quite a bit, and the boy did not have much time left. Having drained enough energy from the boy, Baron Johann threw him away as a trash. Feeling strong again, he said that now he had a lot of energy. Tentacles came out of his hand, as a proof that he had really regained his strength, and the Baron's people just watched, not surprised. Most likely they had seen it many times before. Baron Johann had a rather large, massive, athletic body, and he was pleased to see his body glowing and the energy that was almost pouring out of it, knowing that bioelectricity was much better than batteries and power plants. As soon as Baron Johann moved away from his victim, the girl immediately rushed to his unconscious body, screaming desperately, begging him to wake up. But only now did she realize that his heart was not beating. She was shocked and frightened. The girl could hardly hold back the tears that were coming to her eyes, and Baron Johann, with a kind of animal pleasure, watched the girl. He liked the way she fought, and told her that, of course, the boy's heart was not beating. He had taken all the bioelectricity from him. The people standing around the Baron laughed at her. It was okay, as they say. The first to laugh is the last to laugh. Maybe one of them would get their turn if the Baron didn't have the right victim at hand. The girl turned towards the Baron. She was desperate, and it was this desperation that spoke for her. She shouted to the Baron that she would destroy him. Of course, this only made Baron Johann angry. He did not like the way the girl dared to talk to him, and summoning his tentacles, he grabbed the girl by the neck and lifted her up so that her feet did not touch the floor. As if threatening or maybe mocking, Baron Johann asked if she had enough strength. The girl had already begun to turn blue from lack of air, and the Baron did not think of letting her go, he said, with an evil smile that the girl did not even deserve to be his dinner. But then a force burst in and scattered the girl and Baron Johann in the corners. The energy was purple, So it was Chang Zai-kun, and the girl may have survived, but the Baron did not have time to strangle her. Baron Johann, flying in the air, was caught by Chang Zai-kun's hand, and he did not even have time to react to the attack. Chang Zai-kun stopped near the girl. She survived, but Baron Johann was in trouble, and the guy said bioelectricity or electromagnetism. Yiruka Chang Zai-kun changed. She looked like a whirlpool with tentacles living in it, and lightning sparkled around her. Chang was calm. He had fed her well with energy, so she didn't have to worry. Now he was even stronger than Baron Johann. The girl could not believe her eyes. Here was Chang Zai-kun, the guy she thought was quiet. Now she noticed his hand and was very surprised, and she looked at Chang Zai-kun as if she had never seen him before. But come to think of it, she had never seen him in this form before. Chang Zai-kun's arm began to grow several times larger, the thin threads tightening around it, and the lightning bolts shining brighter and brighter. Chang Zai-kun, seeing Xu Xiang's condition, decided to help him and pushed his hand into his chest with all his might, and the boy opened his mouth. Chang tried to get the heart to work again, and thanks to his strength, the lightning bolts that gave off a shock of electricity penetrated directly into the heart, and the first stroke was heard. Chang Zai-kun managed to start the heart, and the boy, grimacing in pain, hardly painless, was able to make the first sound. He still lay on the floor, unable to get up. This is not surprising because Baron Johann had drained him of all his vitality. Watching Xu Xiang, Chang waited with bated breath for the outcome, but when he heard the boy's first breaths and exhalations, he realized that he had succeeded, and his heartbeat had resumed. Then he was called by Baron Johann, who was very angry and was preparing for another attack. When he saw that Chang Zai-kun had succeeded, Baron Johann was furious, as if he was jealous of the boy, and said, as if he spat poison, that he was tired of using pathetic tricks. Behind them, the other students ran up to Xu Xiang, checking on him as if wanting to see with their own eyes that he was really alive. The Baron did not pay attention to this. He was only interested in Chang Zai-kun, who was talking to Baron Johann, asking him who monsters were, since he considered them to be a source of energy. Baron Johann's eyes were sparkling with anger, and Chang Zai-kun continued to say that the Baron had neither the mysterious charm of monsters nor the human ability to use electricity. Chang Zai-kun, with a purple glow in his eyes, continued to anger Baron Johann, saying that the Baron was only a power-hungry idiot who had managed to gain power, which was disgusting to Chang. Baron Johann burst out laughing madly, and then, when he stopped laughing, Baron Johann, with the tentacles that came out of his fingers, grabbed his own men and began to drain the power, only this time more ruthlessly than he had done to Xu Xiang before, his eyes red and evil as the devil's, and his marks shining like never before. The Baron almost shouted that anyone who dared to go against him, Baron Johann, should die. The girl, who had been sitting by the exhausted Xu Xiang all this time, saw this horrible picture and thought that Baron Johann was draining energy from his subordinates as he had done with the boy before. Her green eyes were frightened by what she saw. At Baron Johann's feet lay the bodies of his subordinates. They were dead, and near them were the tentacles with which Baron Johann had drained the power. Now the Baron really looked like a real monster. His body expanded and his eyes became almost black. Baron Johann, terrifying everyone present, gathered all his strength and summoned a thunderbolt, and with such a force of energy, even the stones rose into the air under the Baron's power. The prisoners, seeing all this, covered their heads with their hands, fearing that they would be hit by a stone, and Chang Zai-kun, standing in front of them to protect them, prepared to attack. Chang Zai-kun, raising his hand to the mountain, released the thread-like tentacles, which were something like chains, the main ones in the middle. Chang Zai-kun was confident and ready for any danger. With the help of his power and tentacles, he managed to create a protective dome around himself and the prisoners with a mesh that Baron Johann's power could not get through, no matter how hard he tried. This dome was called a Faraday cage, a device that protects against external electromagnetic fields, and Chang Zai-kun managed to create it and cover the prisoners with protection. The Baron wondered how the Faraday cage could have been attacked, but it protected them. Baron Egan wondered if the cage would hold if he put more force into the attack, and Chang Zai-kun did his best to hold it. But no matter how hard Chang Zai-kun tried, Baron Johan's strength was many times greater because of those sacrifices, and little by little, that strength broke through the cage and reached out to the boy. Chang Zai-kun realized that he could not hold on for long and that something had to be done. Baron Johann did not calm down and launched attack after attack. His only target was Chang Zai-kun. Baron Johann exerted all his strength to get the boy with his red fire claws. Chang's strength was weakening a little. Baron Johann realized this and began to mock Chang Zai-kun, saying with satisfaction that as soon as this shield fell, he would die. When the dark force was too close, and there was no way out, death was breathing down his neck, Chang Zai-kun noticed a pool below him, which could help him a lot. And as soon as Baron Johann's power broke through the Faraday dome, Chang Zai-kun threw himself into the pool. But Baron Johann did not plan to let his prey go just like that, and he threw himself into the pool after him, planning to kill Chang there. There was nothing left of the human image of Baron Johann. He became one with his red mist, flying up to Chang Zai-kun. He said that it would be better to turn him into a pile of material. But Chang Zai-kun was not going to give up. He covered his face with his hand and said, "Can the Baron really do that?" The boy's eyes lit up and a sly smile appeared on his face. Chang Zai-kun was not empty-handed. He had brought a gift with him, something that looked like a battery or a rechargeable battery, and summoning the power of Blitzkrieg, he was about to turn on the device. Baron Johann didn't even understand what kind of device it was, perhaps a battery, but the monster didn't understand why he was so drawn to it, and the Baron tried to figure out why Chang Zai-kun had brought this device. The Baron did not even understand how this device was in the water at all, and he wondered why water interfered with the conductivity. But Chang Zai-kun decided not to torment Baron Johann with guesses, and he explained that in order to protect himself, he had created a layer of energy before falling into the pool, and that is why the air in it interfered with the conductivity, and Baron Johann could not strike, and it also helped the boy to breathe underwater. The boy continued to say that air is less conductive than water, and while Baron Johann was in the air, he used little energy because he had nowhere to go. But when he got into the pool, he began to lose it quickly because water conducts electricity. And the pool is the first floor. They are standing on the ground. The pool became a lightning rod catching the electricity of Baron Johann and sent it into the ground. Chang was pleased with his trick since Baron Johann spent too much energy. Now he can't turn back. Looking directly at Baron Johann, the guy said that he either did not know or forgot that the current always flows along the path of least resistance and from higher potential to lower. And now the remnants of his energy along with Baron Johann along the metal wire just flow where it is easier to a place with a lower potential, a discharged battery. The Baron stopped in surprise. He could not believe that he had been outsmarted. Only now did it dawn on Baron Johann that Chang Zai-kun had planned it all from the beginning. Having directed his power at Baron Johann, the boy prepared for the attack, and before that he initiated the Baron into the fact that Chang Zai-kun knew very well how electricity works. So, the moment Baron Johann showed his ability, and when Chang Zai-kun realized that it was powered by electricity, Baron Johann's fate was sealed. Chang's strength grew by the minute, and the thread-like tentacles were already around the boy's neck, and his eyes were glowing with a purple light. But the Baron did not want to believe the Chang Zai-kun. Johann could not understand how this was possible, and he was furious and tried to strike a fatal blow to the Chang Zai-kun. He threatened to kill the boy, but now the Baron did not have the strength to do so. The water in the pool was all energized, and if an ordinary person had entered it, He would have received a discharge incompatible with life, but the energy of Baron Johann was not visible at all. And then the tentacles of the Chang'e appeared on the mountain, splashing water all over the surface. And soon the Chang'e himself appeared out of the water. He was drowned and holding a battery. Holding such a treasure in his hands in which Baron Johann was sealed, Chang'e was definitely happy looking at this box, and he recognized that, thanks to people like Baron Johann, he liked monsters more and more. Chang'e admired the accumulator and stroked it carefully, realizing who it was. What kind of creature was imprisoned in it? This was the case when knowledge helped in the case and decided the course of events. But Baron Johann was frightened. He could not believe that he could be overcome by a boy and put in a box. Baron Johann found himself in a place that was covered with crystals above and below, and in the background there was a red wall in which balls like molecules were flying. Among all this, Baron Johann felt like a tiny insect that had fallen into an unknown dimension. This is how Baron Johann felt. He did not understand where he was, but for him, this box would become like a lamp for a jinn, a dungeon. And then Baron Johann's thoughts were interrupted by someone's voice, which asked him, as if mocking whether he missed this place or not, and the Baron turned sharply to this voice because he did not know what to expect, and even without strength. Baron Johann had not expected to see Ah Huan Ren in such a place. Ah Huan Ren had that same giant eye over her, and she was as calm as usual and carried herself like a true person of high rank. Baron Johann did not show his surprise, for he now believed that Chang'e was indeed connected with the Yuesheng. Baron Johann was definitely out of his mind, shouting at the Huan Ren with crazy eyes that they would regret releasing him. Baron Johann said that after he captured Yuesheng, even the capture of the moon would be worthless, and he burst into hysterical, mad laughter that echoed in every corner. And then the Baron felt something wrong when he tried to use his powers. Baron Johann realized that they were gone, but his marks were not burning. Nothing was happening. Seeing Baron Johann's pitiful situation, Jun Ren only said calmly that Chang'e was right about the Baron. She was as calm as ever, and it was strange, because no matter what happened, no matter what she or anyone said, Jun Ren always remained calm. She opened her eyes, her pupils shimmering like a rainbow, from pale pink to deep purple, and said that she did not see Baron Johann as a monster, but as a man greedy for power. But Baron Johann did not seem to be listening to Jun Ren. He was worried and frightened that he could not feel the power. The Baron was screaming, asking what they had done to him, and what they had done to his tentacles, because without them, Baron Johann was just a weak man who could be killed at any moment. With her usual calmness, Jun Ren answered Baron Johann's question. The life expectancy of the monster whose body parts Baron Johann has sewn onto his own body is much longer than his, and because of this difference, Baron Johann will die even faster than if he were a normal human being. Jun Ren said that one day Baron Johann would grow old, and then his body would not be able to withstand the monster's power. The monster would simply use the Baron's body as a source of food. While Jun Ren was talking, Baron Johann began to change. His body began to dry up. His face began to wrinkle as if he were over 100 years old. His hair began to turn gray. And one day, this power would literally burn Baron Johann, who at that time already looked like a mummy with sleepy eyes, a sharp nose, a thin face, and a fire starting to burn around him. Burning in the fire, the dark silhouette of Baron Johann began to scream. His body was drying up. It was a great pain, but he screamed as if he did not understand what was happening. It should not have happened so quickly. He asked who she was. And then Huan Ren changed. Instead of her eyes, she had red lights. She was no longer smiling, but seriously said that karma had caught up with Baron Johann in any case. She only accelerated the process a little. It seems that this time Huan Ren showed her true power. She could control time. And behind her was not one eye, but two. They had changed quite a lot. Jun Ren said that this was his fate as she stood there looking at what was left of the Baron. Nothing. Ashes. The only thing that remained of Baron Johann was the part of the monster's body that he had sewn to himself, around which lightning was gathering. Jun Ren saw this piece with one eye, covered her eyes with her hands and turned away. She didn't want to see it. With her eyes closed, Wan Ren sat down next to the unfortunate monster, right on the stones that shone so beautifully, and reached out her hand to the particle. Wan Ren said that if she opened her eyes and looked, she would not like to see the death of this poor monster. When it was all over, the friends decided to gather at the Drunken Whale, a place decorated in purple and with a spider-like drawing next to the name. Guanshou sat quietly drinking a drink, looking at Chang Zai-kun sitting across from her. He seemed to be either worried or upset about something, sitting at the table in thought and staring at one point, even with a kind of blank stare. Guanshou watched Chang Zai-kun closely, finally unable to stand the silence. She put down her drink, put her foot up, and spoke to Chang Zai-kun. Guanshou admitted that she never thought she would see him like this, but she wondered if everything went well. What was the problem? Red Monster and Naru were sitting next to Chang Zai-kong, trying to support him and distract him, but they couldn't do it. He was in a bad mood, and Guanshou was not far behind. She said that even though his favorite monsters were with him, he was still very depressed. Finally, Chang Zai-kug spoke up, saying that he was just remembering the past and looking at the boy's condition. It was hardly a good memory, but it was still disturbing. Naru looked up at him with interest and looked at him expectantly. Chang Zai-kun asked him gently if he was interested, and it wasn't that it was so bad that it was hard for him to talk about it. So he began his story. Chang Zai-kun's face became serious as he said that when he was a child, he was constantly teased for speaking heresy about monsters. One day, Chang Zai-kun was attacked by a group and he thought he was going to die. It was the first time he was so scared because what can one child do against a group of people who are hostile? But then the world changed. It turned red, and a strange girl appeared in front of Chang Zai-kun, and she came to his aid. The boy remained sitting on the sidewalk, and around him were people, some in pieces, others with only limbs and legs, blood everywhere, and the strange girl stood in front of the boy, offering her hand to help him get up. She, like Chang Zai-kun, could see monsters, probably because of her. Chang Zai-kun was so good at monsters. But one day, she simply disappeared, as suddenly as she had come, the silhouette of her hand never touching Chang's hand and melting away. At the time, Chang Zai-kun thought she had simply moved away and stopped thinking about it. But now that Chang Zai-kun has been exposed to the world of monsters and has learned about the moon grabber, he now thinks that they are the ones who kidnapped the girl. Suddenly Chang Zai-kun stood up, surprising Guanshou, who had been listening attentively, and he continued that this was the reason why he wanted to become strong. It was because of this that he wanted to become stronger and destroy the moon grab, and then find out where this girl was. Chang Zai-kun seemed to have planned everything long ago, and now he was very determined. And then Wan Ren joined the conversation. She didn't beat around the bush. She just said that with the powers that Chang Zai-kun has now, he barely defeated the Baron with great difficulty. Guanshou and Chang Zai-kun turned towards Wan Ren. Jun Ren said that she doubted that Chang Zai-kun would be able to destroy the Capture the Moon organization. Guanshou, who had always seen Jun Ren's support for her boyfriend, was surprised that she was speaking so openly. But Chang Zai-kun did not pay attention to Jun's doubts. He had a goal, and he was going for it. Even though he says he is a poor judge of character, he knows that they have something in common with monsters. At the beginning of the story, when he and Guanshou had a fight in the room, Voga said that between monsters, social status is determined by strength, and in humans, it's the same. The stronger one is right and has power. Summoning his power, the boy said that solving problems by force is what we all have in common. Lightning immediately sparkled around the tentacles, and Chang Zai-kun's eyes became stern and serious. Gathering his courage and closing his eyes, Chang Zai-kun turned to Jun Ren and Guan Shou and asked them to teach him how to use his ability. Trying to hide her pleasure and admiration for Chang Zai-kun's determination, Jun Ren said that it seemed that the boy was not convinced. He was quite stubborn, and that was what she liked about the boy. Jun Ren did not dissuade Chang Zai-kun, because even just developing his abilities would be useful. But after a little thought, she approached the boy and held out her hand, telling him to follow her. Jun Ren led Chang Zai-kun to a very interesting place. It was as if made of ice, shining with azure color, very spacious and very beautiful. It was clear that Chang Zai-kun was looking forward to the place, and walking behind Jun Ren, he looked around the room, if you can call it that. Jun Ren half-turned to the boy and said that they were now in the deepest part of the Yuesheng, some monsters living here in isolation from the world. And then she asked Chang Zai-kong if he still remembered the danger levels of the monsters. The marks under her eyes shone again. Blood rush. Monsters at this level can cause serious damage or blood loss. Not very attractive in appearance. A monster that vaguely resembles a human, similar head and body structure. Angry because the monster, which looks like a fly or mosquito, stings your hand with its trunk and also enjoys blood. Monsters of the dangerous level can easily kill a person. And a good example is a monster with huge eyes, which, instead of a mouth, has dozens of tentacles, and it pierces through a person with these tentacles, through the eyes of the mouth, and can kill several people in one fell swoop. At the level of too dangerous can jeopardize the existence of mankind. It is a strange form of monsters that are difficult to describe, and the scale of the tragedy they can cause is impressive. For example, burn everything they see around them, turn everything they see into ruins. And finally, monsters of the level. Monstrous level threaten the fundamental laws of the world. In short, these giants can destroy the entire planet without a trace. Their shape is quite strange. It is not clear where the mouth or tentacles are, where the eyes are. The most dangerous monsters belong to the level of super dangerous is a monster with a dragon's tail, wings of a bird, like a phoenix, instead of a head, a human hand, and under the wings something like tentacles. We can say that these monsters are a combination of all living things, in which there are the strongest sides of each. Juan Ren said that this place is a real prison for monsters. Chang looked up at the creature and stared at it, mesmerized, and without looking away asked Jun Ren what kind of monster it was. She replied that her name was Shadow. She could materialize memories from the past. The creature seemed to hear that they were talking about her and began to fly gracefully, and it seemed that Juan Ren liked her very much, but no matter how beautiful the creature was, it was still dangerous. If the shadow entered the world of people, it would destroy the course of time without even realizing it. Jun Ren said that the shadow could reunite Chang Zai-kun with his friends, and as if to prove Jun Ren's point, the creature reached out with its tentacles to the floor and began to elongate it. Using this matter as if it were plasticine, the creature shaped it into whatever shape it wanted and molded the image with its skillful tentacles, like a human with his fingers. Chang Zai-kun looked at what the monster was doing with bated breath. It was really fascinating, because she was the only one who could do it. It was not something you see every day. What the shadow had molded and created looked like a creature in a hoodie, with long tentacles instead of arms and legs, as many as an octopus. The shadow was in no hurry to take its tentacles away from the creature, and the sight of the creature really impressed Chang Zai-kun. Chang Zai-kun looked at the monster and realized that it was his corpse. Then the monster from the amulet spoke, asking why Lady Juan Ren had materialized him, since his body was already in the past. Hearing this, Chang Zai-kun was surprised and asked if this was really his past body. Still calmly, Juan Ren told Chang Zai-kun to look at Blitz's present body more closely and asked what Chang Zai-kun could say about it. Silently obeying Jun Ren, Chang Zai-kun removed the monster amulet from his neck as if it were glued to his body. Chang Zai-kun took off the amulet and said that the monster inside it could move freely on his body as if they were not connected. Chang Zai-kun means that the Blitz is not attached to his body. This means that the Blitz is not a parasite at all, and the amulet has quietly stuck its tentacles to Chang Zai-kun's hand, but something has made it learn to parasitize. As Chang Zai-kun looked at the amulet and thought about it, he came to the conclusion that Blitz wanted an independent body. Hearing his master's thoughts, Blitz remarked that his master's insight was surprising. Jun Ren confirmed Chang Zai-kong's guess, and Blitz hoped that Chang Zai-kong would help him with this, but Jun Ren assured him that it would be beneficial for the boy as well. Jun Ren ordered Blitz's former body to absorb his remains, and from now on Blitz would not lend his power to Chang Zai-kun, but now the boy must take possession of it himself to use it. Immediately after that, the image of that girl appeared before Chang Zai-kun's eyes. She was attracted to him. This was his goal. And as he almost reached her, the girl began to melt, as if she were escaping through Chang Zai-kun's fingers like smoke, which could not be caught. But it seemed to Chang that everyone would be happy with the result of this adventure. So Chang Zai-kun grabbed the Blitz gate. He tore his clothes aside with a great force, dispelling the shadow that was under them. And without wasting time, Chang Zai-kun threw on this yellow-brown hoodie as if it had always been his. The boy was confident in his actions. He was so eager to master the power that he saw no obstacles to the goal. And this hoodie obeyed the Zakun Chang and gave everything it had to its new owner. It turned bright purple and began to dissolve on the boy, while lightning raged around them. Having completely dissolved into the Chang, the boy's one eye changed. The power in him completely dissolved. Now they became one. Blitz and Chang Zai-kun, the lightning around him began to subside. Looking at his new self and feeling different, Chang Zai-kun asked Jun Ren if he could say that he was still human. The new sensations threw him off a little, and he needed time to get used to it. But Wan Ren smilingly reassured Chang Zai-kun and assured him that he shouldn't worry. As soon as Blitz gets enough food to be reborn, Chang Zai-kun will be a normal person again. And by the way, the shadow had already prepared the first meal for the boy. Behind him, the created Baron Johann was flying at the boy, angry, with black and red eyes, but his hands looked different now. They were completely red and looked like a drill. His red energy was spreading all over the place. Due to the fact that he and Blitz were one, Chang Zai-kun became many times stronger and immediately sensed the danger behind him and managed to turn around in time to intercept the claw of Baron Johann, which was coming towards him. Not even a single muscle on Chang Zai-kun's face moved. He was completely confident. Seeing Baron Johann in front of him, Chang Zai-kun seemed to ask about the materialization from the past, because what he saw before him was similar to the fact that a shadow could also recreate living beings from the past, and the shadow changed its image and stood not far from Chang Zai-kun and watched with some curiosity what was happening. But then, holding Baron Johann's hand and about to strike, Chang Zai-kun thought that if this copy is the same as the real Baron Johann, then the copy must be absolute in everything. And with that, Chang Zai-kun struck Baron Johann in the chest with all his might, and immediately a stream of blinding light burst forth from the source, and the Baron's face was distorted. But not for long. Coughing after the blow, the Baron was already looking directly at Chang Zai-kun with a familiar expression. His eyes were as wild as they had been in life, like devilish ones. And then, in a second, Baron Johann changed his persona, and in front of Chang Zai-kun, the beast-like monster appeared again, surrounding the boy from all sides with his power, and was already preparing for a new attack. Compared to the size of the Baron at the moment, Chang Zai-kun was half the size. But this was no surprise. The best defense is offense, and Chang Zai-kun knew this very well. And without wasting any time and without waiting for Baron Johann to strike, he attacked him himself, using the power of the shock wave, and a purple light burst out of his hand towards the monster. Baron Johann, judging by the expression on his face, was not pleased. He was losing strength and the haze began to disappear a little. Chang Zai-kun did not relax his attack until he was sure that Baron Johann would not get up, and meanwhile, under the shock wave, he was melting away every minute, and Chang Zai-kun's power enveloped him from all sides. After this fight, Chang Zai-kun drew conclusions and learned a valuable lesson. It turns out that even the same ability can give different results, depending on how you understand how to use it. Chang Zai-kun stood and thought about what had happened, and said that if all the members of the Moon Grabbers were as arrogant and ignorant as Baron Johann, then these electrospheres would be more than enough to destroy them all. These electro-sires were flying behind Chang Zai-kun. They were quite large and took up a lot of space, and a shadow was flying above them, beautiful and majestic. It was like a game to her. It was not often that they went there to train. Wan Renzi stood aside without interfering. She just watched. After the training, everyone went home, and Chang Zai-kun went back to the Guanshu's room. And as soon as she had the opportunity, Guanshu told Chang Zai-kun that now their task was to find the man. It seemed that after some time of cooperation, Guanshu and Chang Zai-kun got along, at least they did not quarrel. But Chang Zai-kun was not in the mood for conversation. He was tired after training, so he immediately went to bed, taking a soft toy with him, saying that he was going to bed, and wished good night to Guanshu, who was still just watching the scene. But that was not the case. Chang Zai-kun did not manage to get on the bed as soon as Guan saw Chang Zai-kun there. In the blink of an eye, she ran to the bed and shouted to the boy to get up. It was her bed. Guanshu threw Chang Zai-kun out of the bed, and so gracefully that he flew face down along with the blanket. Without even resisting and quickly waking up, Chang sat down on the carpet, wrapped in the blanket so that only his head was visible, and told Guanshu that their job was to look for monsters, or, in extreme cases, to deal with the Moon Grabber, wasn't it? The yogi wondered why they should look for an ordinary person. Chang Zai-kun absolutely did not want to deal with strangers, but Guanshu, without hiding her irritation, assured Chang Zai-kun that there was no reason to worry because he knew the man, and picked up the phone, obviously to show him the photo. A familiar face was looking at Chang Zai-kun from the phone. It was his classmate Lori, and she was the one he needed to find. But when he saw her picture, Chang Zai-kun didn't look worried, more like he didn't like the girl. Chang Zai-kun looked away indifferently, saying that he had no idea who she was and that she didn't even look like a loli. Guanshu was furious, yelling at Chang Zai-kun that how could he not remember what his own classmate looked like and that he should stop distorting other people's names. Chang Zai-kun didn't even want to look at her picture to the last, but he pulled himself together and asked why they needed her at all, because as far as he knew, the girl had nothing to do with monsters. Now Guanshu calmed down and picked up Naru, who was happy to participate in the conversation and was also interested, and began to tell him that after their fight with Baron Johann, their organization had erased all memories of what had happened to all ordinary people, but that this student had never been found and her whereabouts were still unknown. Then he asked why they erase people's memories. It seems that Chang Zai-kun does not like such actions, and who would like to have moments from his life erased that he does not need? Naru, sitting on his hands, also looked at Guanshu with interest. She explained that it was not profitable for their organization to let anyone else know about the existence of monsters, because it was a trade secret. They wanted to monopolize all the resources from monsters. A trade secret is a secret of a company, something that no outsider should know. The desire to monopolize is, in short, they want to take all the resources and all the income from monsters. If they ever reveal the existence of monsters, it will be when they rule the world, and neither humans nor monsters want that day. Guanzhou paused, as if to imagine what the world would be like then. After listening to the whole story, Chang Zai-kun wondered why it was they who had to look for Lori. Why couldn't the people in the moonlighting excitement do it, as they had done with the others? It seemed that Chang Zai-kun was looking for any detours to avoid looking for his classmate. Guanzhou explained that the moon capture orders technology is far from perfect, and the moment to erase memories has already been missed. That is why, if they find Lori, they will most likely force her to join the organization, or else she will be surgically transplanted with monster limbs, and there will be no turning back, or she will simply be destroyed so that she cannot tell anyone. Realizing what was going on, Guanzhou began to speak directly, although Chang Zai-kun did not like people, but did not. He feels sorry for the monster, which would be destroyed in order to transplant its limbs to this girl. At least 2 crippled creatures, one on each side. These words made Chang Zai-kun think, at least about the consequences. After finishing this conversation, everyone dispersed. Morning came. It was like being born again with new strength, new thoughts. It is not for nothing that they say the morning is wiser than the evening. What failed in the evening, for example, to make a decision will be possible in the morning with a fresh head. Early dawn is always magical. While everyone is sleeping, the sun rises over the city, showing how beautiful the view can be. Although Chang Zai-kun was given the task of searching, he did not know how to find people at all. The guy went into a rather interesting room, in which everything hinted at traces of magic or some kind of ritual. Looking at the number of candles and the pictogram on the wall, it looks quite interesting and ominous, and on the other hand, fascinatingly mysterious. It would be an ordinary room in which the early sun hit and illuminated the table, if not for all these attributes. But as he picked up the phone and tried to find something in it, Chang Zai-kun realized that there was someone who could do a much better job. The guy called someone and put the phone aside. Still, Chang did not want to do it, so he decided to leave the case to the police. He was sure not to underestimate the cops, but it seems that Guanzhou failed to convince Chang, even by pressing for pity, talking about the death of the monster. The guy was very sleepy, so he decided that while the police were looking for the girl, he would sleep well. As it turned out, it was Chang's room, a rather strange room for a guy. About to go to bed, Chang Zai-kun picked up the blanket and thought that human beds are much more comfortable than those in the monster world. But then something caught Chang Zai-kun's attention. He was shocked to see that on his bed was the very girl who had caused all the commotion, and who had just been reported by Chang Zai-kun to the police, and I can imagine how he would have to explain how he found her. The girl woke up and opened her sleepy eyes, not immediately realizing that she was not alone. Perhaps she woke up because Chang Zai-kun had opened her eyes, rubbing them, but only now did she realize she was not alone in the room. Wasting no time, Chang Zai-kun dialed the police to report that Lori had been found, but the girl was not happy to hear him say that. She watched in horror as his fingers quickly dialed the number. She threw herself at Chang Zai-kun and began to furiously snatch the phone and ask him not to call them, and the guy froze at the reaction. He hadn't expected the girl to be so resistant to it. The girl began to cry and grabbed the sleeve of Chang Zai-kun's t-shirt, begging him to listen to her first, because she could not rely on anyone else. Putting the phone down, the guy was definitely angry. Not only was he terrorized by the search for this girl, but she had somehow been found in his own apartment, his room, and in his bed, no matter how strange it sounded. But the girl looked at the guy with gratitude, and his first question was, of course, how she had gotten here. The girl admitted that she had first looked up Chang Zai-kun's address in her school records and then told the apartment staff that she was his girlfriend and had forgotten her keys. After that, they gladly let her in. Chang Zai-kun slyly looked away and did not miss this chance to tease the girl. That is, she is a girl who used her beautiful body to get what she wanted, just like... Before he could finish, the girl interrupted Chang Zai-kun, shouting at him to watch his language. But all jokes aside, the girl looked at Chang Zai-kun again, begging him to just listen to her. After the incident, they were all taken to the hospital, including students, teachers, and other victims. The girl looked down, remembering how it all happened. At first she thought that they would just receive first aid, but she could not even think how it would turn out. All those present sat waiting. Some were in a stupor, some were scared, but they all listened to what they were told. When a guard and a nurse approached the victims, she asked them to stay calm and take turns going to the emergency room. This was not an ordinary nurse. Her eyes shone in a way that an ordinary person's could not. She ordered those who were worst off to go first. Sitting in the waiting room, the girl turned to her friend and asked him if he thought they were safe or not. She was scared, just like everyone else. As she spoke, she said that she was very scared when they were attacked and captured. And then she remembered Chang Zai-kun and asked where he had gone after all this. But she was interrupted by someone's rough voice. He told the girl to be silent. She turned sharply and kept silent, not wanting to provoke anyone. A man in an orderly's uniform was standing in front of her, and he was not very friendly. He said that this was an emergency center, so he told her to keep quiet. The girl apologized as gently as possible and promised to be as quiet as possible. But then she saw out of the corner of her eye how people in uniform were carrying something similar to a mirror, and something in it seemed wrong to the girl. There was a reflection of the same medic. Meanwhile, one of the victims had the paws of an unknown monster in his ears, mouth, and eyes, and it was not clear what he was doing. This entity was forcing the victim to open his eyes and mouth as wide as possible, almost getting under the skin. It was hardly pleasant. The guy was screaming, resisting, going in. He did not even know where he was going. But then it became clear. This is not a doctor. This is a monster that has the ability to interfere with the human mind and to establish its own order, removing its claws from the guy. He said that everything is ready, and the monster immediately called for the next one. If the waiting people knew what was happening there, it is unlikely that there would be anyone willing to go for the procedure except the most desperate. Seeing this whole picture in the reflection, the girl almost screamed with horror and fear, but in time she covered her mouth with her hand, which turned blue. It is strange that she did not lose consciousness after what she saw, but no one paid attention to her condition, and maybe it is good. When the guy who was operated on came out of the room, he was in a bad way and could barely stand on his feet. It was not clear that he felt better after the help, so it was a very gross interference with the human brain. When she saw the guy, the girl was shocked by his condition and somehow unsurely asked if he was feeling okay, but the answer was obvious from his condition. The guy looked like he was either drunk or drugged, perhaps euphoric, and he told the girl that it was nothing, just a mild concussion. Looking at the guy, the girl herself realized that something was wrong, even nervously began to bite her fingers. Her green eyes saw doom. Is this what awaits her? The guy was pushed out of the office very rudely by the same man who had been rude to the girl, shouting angrily that they should hurry up. He wasn't going to wait forever, and it was obvious, and told him to come in next. The guy just unwillingly got up from the floor, and as if he was zombie-like said okay, and went to the others. The girl realized that something was wrong and something had definitely been done to him. Until recently he looked completely normal. She had to think about how to escape from this hospital. She didn't know what they were doing there, but she didn't want to participate. And then the same guy who came out of the office threw up right on the girl. He threw up. The girl could not stand it and hit the guy in the face with all her strength, shouting how disgusting it was. And there was little really pleasant, not only that they brought them to some place, but also did something with them in that office, and this gift. The girl immediately went to the bathroom, but she had nothing to change into. The guy who had been well and truly hurt could not get up, and the man who pushed him out of the office looked indifferently after the girl and did not pay attention to the unfortunate man at all. He only threw a threatening glare at the girl, so that she would not delay and return quickly. It was impossible to delay the investigation. Such persistence should have been very alarming, not to mention the appearance of the guy after such an investigation. The girl just answered well and quickly went to the room. Once inside, she began to clean herself and her clothes from the traces. It was a spacious bathroom completely tiled in light colors. Undressing completely, the girl began to remove stains with water. And to herself, she said the words of that man, "Quickly turn, yes, and now," so that she could do the same. And then, completing the cleaning, it dawned on the girl. This is a great opportunity to escape. No one followed her. The bathroom was empty. Otherwise, she would have a terrible inspection. Looking out of the bathroom, the girl realized that she was still followed, so they were not going to let her go until they had done their job. She realized that she could not get out unnoticed through the usual exit. She had to look for other options. Well, there was only one way out to escape through the window. But looking out of the window to the street, she saw that there were people in uniforms walking around the perimeter, guarding the perimeter so that no one could escape. It was already night, so this could play into her hands. The girl was already quite frightened, but did not understand the main thing, why this place was so guarded. The uniform of this man was exactly the same as the one at the entrance to the restroom, so he was one of them. The man, as if sensing something, turned towards the window and peered at it intently. The girl was beginning to panic. Would it be so difficult to escape from this place? If she could not do it, she would be forced to go through this horrible procedure. And then something began to approach the girl's ear. It looked like some kind of pink fog, which seemed to want to attract attention. The girl turned around in confusion. She could not understand what it was, and maybe it was strange. She asked who was there, and then an entity came out of nowhere, frightening the girl with its appearance. It was azure purple in color, and it was already quite beautiful. Chang Zekun listened carefully and asked what she wanted to say, that it was a monster that helped the girl escape. It even sounds strange, because monsters usually do not help people. They are considered dangerous and pests. And the girl confirmed. She even understood what it wanted to tell her. And it was thanks to this entity that the girl was able to escape and hide at the house of Chang Zai-kun. The girl was sitting on the bed, and Chang Zai-kun slowly approached and asked her to tilt her head, cautiously, as if afraid to scare her. The girl looked at Chang Zai-kun with doubt and suspicion. Who knows what this strange man might have in mind? She asked him what he wanted to do, but she listened, and Chang Zai-kun put his hand on her head as if he wanted to see something. Leaning almost close to the girl, Chang Zai-kun assured her that she did smell like a monster, so she was telling the truth, and gestured that it was good. The girl was angry, not liking the fact that Chang Zai-kun was happier at this discovery than when he had learned that the girl had escaped. But laughing, Chang Zai-kun asked what a frogger was. A frogger is a person who breaks into a house and lives in it when the owner is away. But to tell the truth, Chang Zai-kun exaggerated a little. The girl was angry to the fullest and began to shout at Chang that he at least understood how many admirers she had, each of them only dreaming of her, at least talking to them. And Chang Zai-kun was not satisfied with something else, but really only with the fact that he had been broken into and even in his bed and not allowed to sleep properly. Chang Zai-kun only watched this hysteria, which, by the way, was very much played up. After listening calmly, Chang Zai-kun replied that what did her fans have to do with him? The girl was a little shocked. She could only dream of one thing if she wanted to hit Chang Zai-kun now, because she did not expect that a girl like her could not be interested in him. She failed to increase the number of fans, attributing Chang Zai-kun to them. But she pulled herself together and smilingly replied that she was still happy that she had decided to come to Chang Zai-kun, because after the massacre that Chang Zai-kun had caused at school with Baron Johann, and seeing who he really was, she realized that in such a situation she could only rely on this guy. Only he could help and protect her. And the guy was not happy that she was with him, so diligently evading her search, and the girl found him herself. Such a joke of fate. But still, to his credit, Chang Zai-kun was surprised that she managed to escape at all. The girl was not as weak as Chang Zai-kun thought. Remembering their first encounter, they had also pretended to be hospital employees. Only the psychiatrists were hospital psychiatrists, so they had enough power to easily infiltrate government agencies, which was not good news because it meant that the order could be anywhere. They were even able to hide the massacre at the school, which is also proof of their power in the city, so they have access to all government agencies. And perhaps people from the Moonrise Order are in the government and the security forces. So, Chang Zai-kun thinks that they deliberately let the girl go. Probably their target is the monster who helped the girl escape. And judging by the expression on the girl's face, she didn't think about it. And apparently, they are using the girl as bait. This theory was true. The girl was thinking, so they knew she was planning to escape, and they knew she would at least try to do so and that a monster would help her, but they didn't want to lose such a rare chance to track down another monster and make a new copy of it for organ transplants to someone else in the order. Chang Zai-kun confirmed that this was entirely possible, and if it was true, they would manifest themselves as soon as the girl met the monster. Now, the girl realized the danger of the situation and clung to Chang Zai-kun's sleeve again. So when they found the monster, they would take her away, and she didn't want to be caught. So she asked Chang Zai-kun what she should do. Chang took her hands off him to begin with. It seems the girl's charms don't work on him. The guy is even pissed off. He said we'll use the girl as bait. She hadn't expected such an answer and was surprised why he didn't even think about the girl's safety. Although considering how he didn't want to look for the girl, it wasn't too surprising. Chang Zai-kun explained that his job was to find prodigal monsters and bring them to Yuesheng, so they needed to find this monster before the moon rapture people found him.